Chapter 1984. Tianxia focused on reading the Jade Slip. All kinds of information flowed into his mind like a tide. There were thousands of notes in the Jade Slip. Yang Tian's deep voice sounded in Tianxia's mind. 10 days ago, Qi and I entered the secret realm by mistake. We searched the entire secret realm but couldn't find the exit. We could only wait patiently. This morning, Qi was attacked by demonic beasts in the mountains. I killed dozens of demonic beasts, but was surrounded by a group of demonic beasts and human martial artists. These aboriginals were weak. I killed hundreds of them with a snap of my fingers, shocking everyone. However, thousands of people heard the news and surrounded Qi and me. I subdued thousands of martial artists and ordered them to return to their residence. Only then did I find a golden divine tower with an extraordinary aura. It must be a divine weapon. There was another world in the tower. Tens of thousands of martial artists lived in the tower. They knew nothing about the outside world. They were hostile and swore to take revenge. Qi and I worked together to kill thousands of them, shocking the martial artists of the two races. Since we couldn't leave the secret realm, we decided to stay in the tower and explore its secrets. I have a feeling that this godly pagoda is hiding some shocking secrets. It might be able to help us achieve the martial god realm. Information after information flashed through Tianxia's mind. There was no doubt that these were notes written by Yang Tian. It was full of his and Yin Qi's experiences, from when they first entered the Yin Yang secret realm, discovered the divine tower and ruled the human and demonic beasts. Tianxia felt that he was getting closer to the truth, so he continued to read the notes. As the Yin Yang sages ruled the divine tower, the time between each note became longer and longer. The short ones were a month or two and the long ones were decades apart. Among them, the longest time span was actually over 100 years. That was about 100 years after Yang Tian ruled the two races. At that time, the situation in the tower was stable. The human and demonic beast had multiplied to more than 70,000 people and were ruled by the Yin Yang sages. Yang Tian and Yin Qi worked together to explore the divine tower. It took them decades to enter the second level of the divine tower. On the second floor of the divine pagoda, the two of them saw the statue of the six-armed Vajra war god and the codex. In the codex, half of the codex and half of the divine arts were recorded in the ancient demon language. It was called the life god sealing technique. The Yin Yang saints were overjoyed to have obtained half of the divine art. Both of them saw the light at the end of the tunnel. There was hope for them to break through to the martial god realm. They cultivated in seclusion in the second level and spent 100 years to fully comprehend the first half of the divine arts. After the incident, Yang Tian wrote it down in his notebook. At that time he was overwhelmed with emotions and lofty ambitions. As I expected, there is indeed a great opportunity in the divine pagoda. It allowed me to see the demon race's god and obtain half of a divine art. He had never thought that the ancient demon clan would be so powerful and possess such a profound divine art. This half of the common people's god sealing technique was just unbelievable and totally weird. My horizons have been broadened. Only now do I know that there are 3,000 great Daoists in the world and every great Dao can confer divinity. Qi and I have no hope of breaking through to the martial god realm, and we haven't had any opportunities. The heavens are so kind to let us obtain the god sealing technique. Coincidentally, there are tens of thousands of martial artists on the first floor of the divine pagoda who can help us gather faith. From then on, the Yin Yang saints returned to the first floor of the divine pagoda and began to build statues and altars for the tens of thousands of people to worship. The two of them used the common people's god sealing technique to absorb the faith of the people. As expected, their strength improved by leaps and bounds, and they saw the hope of becoming gods. In the next 200 years, their strength continued to improve. They were as powerful as gods. However, their strength was infinitely close to the martial god realm, but they could not break through. The Yin Yang saints gradually lost their patience. No matter how hard they thought, they could not find a solution. Therefore, they climbed the divine pagoda again and spent another few decades to reach the third floor of the divine pagoda. On the third floor, the two of them found a mysterious ancient tomb. They tried everything and went through tens of thousands of attempts and failures, but they still could not open the Golden Crow tomb, let alone obtain the treasures and inheritance in the tomb. The two of them were disheartened and could only return to the first floor of the divine pagoda. 100 years later, Yang Tian and Yin Qi had reached the peak, but they still could not break through to the martial god realm. They had also finished cultivating the first half of the divine technique. Without the second half, they could only deduce and guess on their own. The two of them were desperate. After 30 years of torment and hesitation, Xianxia finally decided to take the risk. She wanted to sacrifice 100,000 people to gather the divine thoughts of the common people and forcefully break through to the martial god realm to become a god. At that time, Yang Tian strongly objected. He did not want her to risk her life, and he did not want to see her slaughter 100,000 people. However, Xianxia was completely desperate. She stubbornly decided to fight to the death. Before the ceremony, she wrote down a note in a jade slip. I was originally a demon, but why did I have to become a god? Since I have entered this path, there is no turning back. Even if I have sinned and will be punished by heaven, I will bear it alone. It has nothing to do with Yang Tian. As a demon, I should have the highest chance of success in deducing the god sealing technique. Even if it is risky, I should be the one to try. The final result was just as Ji Tianxing saw. Xianxia held a grand divine technique ceremony on the first floor of the divine pagoda and cast a spell to take the souls and lives of 100,000 people. In the end, the divine thoughts of the common people were successfully condensed. She used the god sealing technique to forcefully devour the divine thoughts of the common people, intending to become a god. However, she could not withstand the chaotic and violent divine thoughts of the common people and soon exploded and died. Not only was her body shattered, but even her soul collapsed and dissipated. She died on the spot. Yang Tian also did his best to help her refine the divine power of the common people. Unfortunately, the two of them failed and ended up in a miserable state. Xianxia died and Yang Tian was seriously injured by the explosion. He was in a coma for several years before waking up. Since then, Yang Tian was the only one left alive on the first floor of the divine pagoda. He was lonely and desperate. He missed his dead wife every day and his mind was not clear. Xianxia's death was too big a blow to him. From then on, there was only one belief left in his heart that supported him to live. That was to break through to the god realm at all costs. Only by breaking through to the god realm could he leave this secret realm. More importantly, he had a chance to use the divine technique to resurrect his dead wife, Xianxia. 20 years later, his injuries were mostly healed. Therefore, he took his dead wife's belongings and left the first floor of the divine pagoda. He entered the third floor of the divine pagoda and spent 100 years to solve the mystery of the Golden Crow tomb. Not only did he open the passage to the fourth floor, but he also obtained half of the sun-devouring divine technique under the tombstone. Later, there were fewer and fewer notes in the jade slips, and the time span became longer and longer. However, Ji Tianxing understood what happened after that through the short notes. Yang Tian entered the fourth floor of the divine sea and was attacked by countless sea beasts. However, he was a martial saint and was invincible. He easily killed hundreds of sea beasts. He tried to cultivate the sun-devouring divine technique and devoured the flesh and souls of many sea beasts. His strength increased greatly. This gave him hope of breaking through to the god realm. He was encouraged and started a massacre in the divine sea. Chapter 1985. An hour later, Ji Tianxing finished reading all the contents of the jade slip. He already knew the truth of the matter from beginning to end. Yang Tian had slaughtered the deity sea and devoured the power of millions of sea beasts. He went into the eye of the sea and hid in the crystal palace-like coral reef, concentrating on refining his magic power. However, he had only obtained half of the sun-devouring divine technique. During the process of cultivation, 90% of the power of millions of sea beasts had been wasted. Not only was the amount of power he could refine pitifully, but it was also very chaotic. After 300 years, his power had reached its limit, and he had also cultivated half of the divine technique to its limit. Even though he had the combat power of a martial god, he still could not break through to the martial god realm. He was completely desperate. He had been alone for too long and he had been depressed for hundreds of years. It made him crazy and had nothing to live for. A few years before his death, little Blue Kun came to the eye of the sea. Yang Tian found this fish that had escaped the net, but he did not kill it. He did not even hurt little Blue Kun. He knew very well that he had killed millions of sea beasts in order to cultivate the sun-devouring divine technique. He was simply a bastard and stupid. Therefore he was full of guilt and often regretted and blamed himself. After spending a few years with little Blue Kun, he finally felt relieved and became indifferent to life and death. He decided to risk his life and use the sun-devouring divine technique to break through to the immortal state. If he succeeded, everything would be fine. He would have a chance to leave the tower and resurrect his dead wife. If he failed, he would follow his dead wife and reunite with her in the netherworld. Later he drove little Blue Kun away. Above the vortex, he burned his life's blood and magic power to break through to the immortal state with the help of the sun-devouring divine technique. There was no doubt that he also failed. He exploded and died on the spot. His body was blown to pieces and his divine soul collapsed and dissipated. The Yin-Yang saints had died, but the world did not know. Later, little Blue Kun returned to the Eye of the Sea, picked up Yang Tian's remains and threw them into the cave. Everything was over. It's all this shitty tower's fault. I don't know who arranged it, but only half of the divine arts are left. Yang Tian and Yin Qi were driven mad and killed by half of the god-sealing art and half of the sun-devouring divine art. Ji Tianxing could only feel pity for the fate of the Yin-Yang saints and let out a faint sigh. After learning the truth and learning about what had happened 800 years ago, his heart felt heavy. However, the past was the past. He quickly put away his sympathetic thoughts and continued to flip through the other jade slips. It wasn't long before he pulled out 2 faint golden jade slips from the mountain of jade slips. These 2 specially made jade slips were reinforced and protected by a saint-level array formation. Even after thousands of years, it would not be destroyed. Ji Tianxing spent 2 hours to remove the sealing array formation on the jade slip. Just as he expected, the 2 jade slips contained half of the life god sealing technique and half of the sun-devouring divine technique. He put the 2 jade slips into his spatial ring and kept them safe. The voice of the burial of heaven immediately sounded in his mind. It's just 2 divine arts of the demon clan. You didn't care for them back then. Besides, you don't need the jade slips to remember the complete incantation, right? Ji Tianxing explained with a smile. People always change. I am Ji Tianxing now, not the Kenshin of the past. Besides, even if I don't care for these 2 divine arts, I can give them to someone else. The burial of heaven didn't say anything more, agreeing with his statement. At this moment, a sharp sigh came from outside the cave. The little Blue Kun was obviously anxious. It said to Ji Tianxing with special syllables, "Hey, why haven't you come out yet? You don't want to stay here, do you?" Obviously, the little Blue Kun was still on guard against this problem. Ji Tianxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand and sent out a few rays of golden light. He dug a hole in the ground and buried Yang Tian's bones and belongings. Then he walked out of the cave unhurriedly and came in front of the little Blue Kun. "You little guy, why are you so guarded? Can't you trust me a little?" As he said this, he even stretched out his finger and knocked on the little Blue Kun's fat head. Even though he didn't use any strength, the little Blue Kun instinctively retreated and hid 1,000 feet away in fear. Ji Tianxing immediately laughed loudly with a mocking expression. The little Blue Kun finally reacted. It knew that he was deliberately teasing it and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a moment, it stammered, "That, you've already seen the bones of the white-clothed man. Are you going to leave?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "If I can find the exit, I want to leave now. So if you want me to leave early, you have to help me find the exit." The little Blue Kun was instantly overjoyed and nodded repeatedly. "Okay, then it's a deal. I'll help you find the exit." After promising Ji Tianxing, it quickly became listless. Its eyes were a little depressed as it said, "But I've lived here for thousands of years, and I haven't found any exit?" Ji Tianxing stretched out his hand and knocked on its big head again, hinting, "Even if there's an exit, it must be hidden. You have to think carefully. Where are the special areas or signs?" Special areas or signs. The little Blue Kun tilted its head and looked at Ji Tianxing. After thinking for a moment, it suddenly thought of something. "I remember now. Not far from my house there's a 5-colored hill. I'll take you there." Before it could finish speaking, it couldn't wait to lead Ji Tianxing to the 5-colored hill. After a quarter of an hour, when Ji Tianxing followed it and arrived at the 5-colored hill, he found that it was a hill piled up by coral reefs. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and used the 10,000 divine eyes to observe the hill for a long time, but he didn't find any clues. "Little guy, this is just an ordinary coral reef. There's no formation mystery. Think again. Is there any other place that's also very special?" The little Blue Kun tilted its head. After thinking for a moment, it nodded and said, "Yes, there are dozens of hills like this in the surrounding 10,000 miles." Ji Tianxing was speechless. He couldn't help but knock on its head and remind it, "Hey fathead fish, can you use your little head a little? Do colorful coral reefs gathered into a hill mean that it's very special? Other than these hills, is there any other place?" The little blue Kuan showed an aggrieved expression as if it was very hurt and wanted to cry. After thinking seriously for a moment, it solemnly shook its head and said, "There's no other place." Ji Tianxing was completely helpless. He could only accept his fate and said with a wry smile, "All right, then we can only investigate those 5-colored hills first. I hope the heavens are watching over us. The exit of this layer of space is really in those 5-colored hills." The little blue Kuan learned to be smart. It didn't answer or explain. Chapter 1986. It turned out that little blue Kuan was such a simple fish it would not lie. Ji Tianxing explored more than a dozen colorful hills and finally found a special hill. This hill was located in the trench and was surrounded by darkness. Only the hill was covered with coral reefs that were emitting colorful lights and emitting powerful energy waves. Ji Tianxing circled the hill a few times and used his divine sense to explore. There was another mystery inside the hill. Little blue Kuan saw that he was silent and was afraid that he would not believe it, so it explained, "I vaguely remember that the seniors of the sea beasts would often come here to hold sacrificial ceremonies. I was still young then and did not understand what they were doing. Now that I think about it, they seem to be worshipping and praying to a god." Ji Tianxing nodded and told it, "Wait here, I'll go in and take a look." Then he passed through the layers of coral reefs and entered the colorful hill. He released his divine sense and used the 10,000 divine eyes to carefully explore the inside of the hill. An hour later he discovered that there was a mysterious formation hidden in the 5-colored hill. The formation was very mysterious. It should be a god-level formation of the demon clan. He racked his brain for a long time before he remembered that this should be the demon clan's supreme god-sorcerer formation. Phew. Fortunately, it's only a true-level divine formation. There should be a chance to open it. Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief as a pleased smile appeared on his face. The martial god powerhouses in this world were only virtual gods in the upper realm, or they were called false gods. If one could ascend to the upper realm and become stronger through baptism and cultivation, one could become a real god and be called a true god. A true god-level divine formation was the most common in the upper realm. Therefore, Ji Tianxing was confident that he could open the supreme god-sorcerer formation. The biggest problem and obstacle was that his strength was only at the tribulation stage. Without reaching the martial god stage, one could not release divine power. To open the divine formation, one had to use divine power. Normal magical power was useless. Burial of Heaven was also anxious and worried. Even if you know all kinds of divine arts and remember the way to break this divine formation, it's useless. You only have the strength of the tribulation realm. How can you break the divine array? Isn't that going against the heavens? Only if you have reached the martial god realm will you have enough confidence. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, then revealed a meaningful smile. He shook his head and said, "That might not be the case. I still have a chance. Although I haven't recovered to the god realm, I can still use the power of stars and lightning. These two powers are of the same origin as god power. What's more, I still have the heaven-mending pearl, a divine artifact. I've nurtured it for so long and helped it recover so much of its strength. It's time for it to do something for me." Then he formed a seal with both hands and began to cast a spell to break the array. His left hand released the silver star fire, and his right hand released the 4-colored lightning, which he infused into the supreme god wizard formation. The veins and nodes of the formation were immediately activated, emitting a brilliant 7-colored glow. This scene proved that Ji Tianxing's method was feasible. He was greatly encouraged. Burial of Heaven was also excited. He said expectantly, "I didn't expect this method to work. You're simply too heaven-defying. Breaking the divine formation as a tribulation realm cultivator is definitely an unprecedented miracle. Even you couldn't accomplish such a feat in your previous life." Ji Tianxing cast a spell to break the formation and said to Burial of Heaven with his divine thoughts, "Since I've been reborn, of course I have to surpass my previous life, create another miracle and climb to the peak. I can't just stay in the same place, right?" Buried Heaven made a sound of agreement, expressing his deep agreement. Unknowingly, a day had passed. Ji Tianxing used the power of stars and lightning to open the entire Supreme God Wizard formation. He had already broken about 30% of it. Even though he had a lot of power, he was exhausted. He was so tired that his face was pale and he was sweating profusely. After all, what he wanted to break was a real divine formation, something that didn't belong to this world. Miracles weren't so easy to create. Outside the small mountain, little Blue Kun was waiting anxiously again. It was a little nervous. It wanted to urge Ji Tianxing to ask about the progress of the matter. However, it remembered what happened before, so it could only be patient and continue to wait. 2 days passed. Ji Tianxing was still breaking the formation in the small mountain. He had already used up 60% of his power. His strength was greatly weakened and he looked very tired. Thus he began to use the power of the heaven-mending orb to help him break the divine formation. With the support of the heaven-mending orb's divine power, the speed of breaking the formation was obviously several times faster. The small mountain emitted 7-colored divine light, illuminating dozens of miles around. Late at night on the 3rd day, the 7-colored divine light emitted by the small mountain suddenly retracted. The divine light condensed into a 7-colored door of light that was 30 feet tall, and appeared in the small mountain. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing had successfully broken the Supreme God Wizard formation and opened the entrance to the 5th level. He hurriedly ended the spell and lay on the ground, exhausted, panting heavily. He had almost used up all of his power. He only had about 20% left. At this moment his power had fallen to the extreme. It could be said that he was an arrow at the end of its flight. It was as if he had fought a great battle and was heavily injured. Fortunately, his body was special and had a powerful self-healing ability. The heaven-mending orb also released a mysterious white light that entered his body and helped him quickly recover his power. After a short 6 hours, Ji Tianxing's power had recovered to 60%, and his fatigue was greatly reduced. At this moment, little Blue Kun couldn't hold back the doubts and nervousness in its heart. It opened its mouth and asked, "Hey, are you still inside? The small mountain isn't shining anymore. Did something happen? Are you dead? If you're dead then I'm leaving." Ji Tianxing wanted to circulate his energy to regulate his breathing, but when he heard the last sentence he was so angry that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Swoosh! His figure flashed and flew out of the small mountain, appearing in front of little Blue Kun. Thump! Thump! Ji Tianxing reached out his hand like lightning and knocked on its head twice. He scolded in annoyance. "You fat head fish, can't you be more tactful with your words? Where's the trust we agreed on? Where's the sincerity we agreed on? If I'm really dead, are you not even going to collect my corpse?" Little Blue Kun was knocked and dodged repeatedly. Its big eyes blinked repeatedly, revealing a look of grievance. "Why are you hitting me again? I'm just concerned about you. Is there anyone who cares about others like you?" Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes at it. Little Blue Kun thought for a moment and quickly changed the topic. "You're safe and sound. Did you succeed?" "Yes." Ji Tianxing nodded. Little Blue Kun immediately revealed a look of surprise and asked, "That's great. Then you can leave now." Ji Tianxing glanced at it from the corner of his eyes and revealed a malicious smile. He said in a strange tone, "Little guy, it's too lonely for you to stay here alone. It's not good for cultivation. I know the Kun race very well. I can help you grow and become stronger quickly. Come with me to the 6th level of the Divine Pagoda. That's the holy land for cultivation." Chapter 1987. Little Blue Kun had been in contact with Ji Tianxing for a few days and had already established a preliminary trust. Its guard against Ji Tianxing had also been greatly reduced. However, when it heard Ji Tianxing's words, its nerves immediately tensed up. Before Ji Tianxing could finish speaking, it widened its eyes and revealed a look of intense vigilance. You want to trick me and take me away from here?" As it spoke, it subconsciously retreated. Hey, this fat head fish isn't stupid. Ji Tianxing thought so in his heart, but on the surface he still had to show a gentle and sincere expression and patiently persuade it. "Little fellow, what do you mean by trick? Don't make it sound so unpleasant. I'm doing this for your own good. How lonely would it be for you to stay here alone? There's no one to chat with and no one to teach you cultivation. This place is barren and too boring. I'll take you to see the wonderful world and help you become a god." Little Blue Kun was stunned when it heard this, and the vigilance in its eyes did not decrease at all. After Ji Tianxing finished speaking, it shook its head repeatedly and said, "After all that talk, you still want to trick me into leaving? Humph, I won't believe you anymore, you bad guy." After saying that, it turned around and ran without hesitation as fast as a bolt of blue lightning. Seeing that it did not listen to his advice at all, Ji Tianxing was rather helpless and could only use the heaven-capturing dragon claw. Swoosh! A huge golden dragon claw descended from the sky and grabbed Little Blue Kuan. Little Blue Kuan still wanted to teleport and escape, but the surrounding space was sealed and it was immediately captured. The golden dragon claw held it tightly, and no matter how it struggled, it could not break free. It resisted desperately, constantly letting out sharp hissing sounds and cursing angrily. "Bad guy. You liar, let go of me. You want to harm me, kill me and steal my territory. I shouldn't have believed you, humans are all evil bastards." Ji Tianxing wanted to explain to it, but the 7-colored light gate in the small mountain had already begun to flicker and soon closed. Helplessly, he could only throw the Little Blue Kuan into the sword world and rush into the small mountain. Shwa! He turned into a streak of golden light and darted into the light gate at lightning speed. In the next instant, the door of light flickered with 7-colored divine light and disappeared into thin air. Tranquility returned to the colorful mountain as if nothing had happened. Ji Tianxing passed through an invisible spatial barrier, left the 4th floor of the divine pagoda and entered the 5th floor. Light returned to his eyes and his feet landed on the ground. Lowering his head, he saw that the ground beneath his feet was paved with top-grade white jade. It was flat and smooth, shining with a white light. The surroundings were illuminated by the brilliance of the white jade, making it seem very spacious. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked around. Gradually he could see clearly. This was a spacious hall with a radius of about 3,000 meters. The circular hall was hundreds of meters high, and the dome was filled with stars shining brightly. This was a style unique to the god realm, where the ceiling would often be decorated with star charts. After all, deities drew on the divine power of the stars to cultivate. Ji Tianxing could see that the thousands of light spots on the dome were not embedded gems. Instead, they were real stars that had been compressed into the size of a fist by a divine art and embedded in the dome. What a grand display! It's comparable to my power back in the day. It seems that the master of this divine pagoda is at least a god king. Ji Tianxing understood and could not help but secretly exclaim in admiration. At this time, Burial of Heaven reminded him, there seems to be an altar in the middle of the hall. Ji Tianxing turned around and looked at the center of the hall. Sure enough, he saw a 100-meter-tall platform. He quickly flew over and observed it closely. The 100-meter-tall altar had a strong demonic style. It was built with 5-colored stones and embedded with tens of thousands of gold and silver gems, as well as other special materials. Ji Tianxing could tell at a glance that all of the materials were divine items, and they were top-notch treasures that could only be found in the higher realms. They definitely did not exist in Xingwu continent. What was even stranger was that the altar was not in the shape of a spire. Instead, it looked like a giant mushroom. The bottom was narrow and the top was a platform with a radius of 300 meters. On the platform, there were 18 demonic god statues of different shapes arranged in a circle. There was a celestial wolf with a pair of silver wings, an enchanting fox god with a charming temperament, and a one-legged kuei cow that controlled divine lightning. The 18 demonic god statues were all different in appearance. Some were ferocious and tyrannical, while others were mysterious and enchanting. They all faced the center of the platform like 18 loyal guards that were protecting something. Ji Tianxing sized up the 18 demonic god statues before looking at the center of the platform. The center of the platform was empty. There was only a circular formation on the ground that was 30 meters wide. There were thousands of lines on the formation, and hundreds of ancient demonic characters that were divided into tens of thousands of different regions. Ji Tianxing could tell at a glance that this was not an ordinary formation, but rather a divine compass formation. A mere 30 meters wide compass contained an unparalleled mystery that had thousands of transformations and effects. Only a top-notch divine master in the Tao of formations could control a divine compass formation. Kenshin had been the king of gods in the past, and he had been extremely knowledgeable and well-versed in everything. Ji Tian walked to the vicinity of the divine compass formation and observed it attentively. He revealed a deep pondering expression. Relying on his incomplete memories, he tried his best to identify this divine compass formation. Time passed silently. He stood motionless in his original spot, deep in thought. His brain was working at full speed. The thousands of lines and hundreds of ancient characters on the compass constantly flickered in his mind, changing into various formations. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. Tianxia finally looked relieved and a smile appeared on his face. So that's how it is. It's actually the legendary Origin Divine formation that can open the Origin Divine gate that leads to the 33 Paradise. Burial of Heaven had remained silent and did not disturb him. At this moment, Buried Heaven was a little shocked to hear that. The Origin Divine formation? Isn't that a regal divine art that only a demonic god king can master? Tianxia nodded. That's right. I'm now certain that the master of this 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower is a demonic god king. Moreover, this god king resides in the 33 Paradise and is one of the strongest demonic powerhouses. This Origin Divine formation is the core of this divine tower. As long as I can decipher this formation, I'll be able to enter and exit the tower as I please. Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then said with some concern, since it's a regal divine formation, then we have no chance. Unless you recover your past strength and return to the God King realm. Tianxia nodded and smiled bitterly. That's right. The Origin Divine formation of the demonic race is one of their top techniques. It's extremely profound and complex. Even I had to expend some effort to decipher it in the past. I'm too weak right now, so I can't do it. After a pause, he smiled playfully. However, I can't control this divine tower for now, so there's no need to decipher the Origin Divine formation. Chapter 1988. Tianxia's words caused Burial of Heaven to fall into deep thought. It carefully analyzed the situation before replying solemnly. Although the logic is not bad, it's very difficult to implement. You only have the strength of a Tribulation Realm cultivator, yet you want to activate a king-grade formation. That's too absurd. Tianxia smiled confidently and said playfully, I know all of this, but Burial of Heaven, you forgot a secret technique. The Divine Blood Imperial Spirit technique. Burial of Heaven fell silent and it took a long time before it recovered. It asked in shock, You can't be thinking of using the Divine Blood Imperial Spirit technique to communicate with this Origin God formation, right? Why not? This is a strange move. Tianxia's eyes shone even brighter. Burial of Heaven became even more worried and hurriedly tried to dissuade him. Are you crazy? Why would you risk using such a secret technique? The Divine Blood Imperial Spirit technique is usually used to refine ownerless artifacts, and it has the effect of recognizing a master with a drop of blood. If it succeeds, it will allow the host to communicate with the artifact smoothly and allow them to fuse as quickly as possible. However, this divine pagoda definitely has an owner. If you fail to recognize a master with your blood, you will suffer a backlash from the pagoda and its master. You also said that the master of this pagoda is the Devil King of the 33 heavens. You definitely won't be able to withstand the backlash from the pagoda, and there's a 99% chance that you will lose your life. Tianxia refused to give up and said confidently, Burial of Heaven, have you ever wondered why the pagoda of that Devil King appeared on Shenwu continent? According to historical records, the Yin-Yang realm existed 5,000 years ago. If that Devil King was still alive, would he have left the pagoda outside? Thus, I'm 80% sure that the Devil King has already fallen. Even if he didn't fall, he must have encountered a great calamity and can't even take care of himself. Burial of Heaven considered it for a moment before saying, That's possible, but you have to consider the consequences. If you fail and suffer a backlash, it's very likely that you will lose your life. Tianxia consoled, Don't worry, I have the Heaven Mending Pearl to protect my soul, so I definitely won't lose my life. Apart from taking a risk, we have no other choice but to be trapped here and wait for death. Therefore, this is the only way. Burial of Heaven also understood his situation and did not say anything more. Then Tianxia began to cast his spell. He sat cross-legged in the Origin Divine formation, his face solemn as he waved his hands and formed hand seals, sending out bolts of astral fire and lightning. Silver and purple divine power continuously poured into the compass beneath him. His casting speed was not fast. He cast the divine spells in an orderly manner. He was very serious and focused. After all, he was about to activate a king-grade divine array. Even after tens of millions of years, the power of the divine pagoda had been greatly weakened, and the power of the great array had also been weakened. However, it was still not something that ordinary gods could touch. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. Ji Tianxing continued to cast spells. His spirit and magic power were very empty, and his breath was getting weaker and weaker. Burial of Heaven could no longer sit by and watch, hurriedly fusing with him to provide him with strength. He then used the divine power of the Heaven Mend Pearl, and the pressure on him instantly lessened. Soon 10 days had passed. The Origin Divine Formation, which had a radius of 100 feet, now had several hundred lines and ancient characters, all of them shining with silver and purple light. The crucial moment of casting the spell had finally arrived. Ji Tianxing was about to use his essence and divine blood to communicate with the Origin Divine Formation beneath him. Success or failure will depend on this. He softly muttered as he slowly extended his right index finger and forced out a drop of blood from his heart. This was a drop of golden divine blood, radiating a dazzling golden light and imbued with immense power. Drip. The divine blood fell onto the compass, dripping onto the fist-sized diagram at its center. The golden divine blood instantly fused into the formation and vanished. The entire Origin Divine Formation erupted with dazzling golden light, illuminating the surroundings. All the lines, characters and diagrams of the formation lit up with golden light and quickly connected together. An invisible bloodline connection formed between Ji Tianxing and the Origin Divine Formation. This sort of connection was like that of a father and a brother. As the light of the Origin Divine Formation grew more and more dazzling, this connection of bloodline and energy grew more and more intense. Ji Tianxing was overjoyed and couldn't help but cheer in excitement. My guess was right. It really did work. There was no doubt that his spell had succeeded. As expected, the master of the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda, the monster race god king of the 33 heavens, had perished. This divine pagoda had become an ownerless object. Now Ji Tianxing had dripped his blood on it to claim it as his master. Since he was connected to the Origin Divine Formation by blood, he could control the formation with his mind and freely enter and exit the divine pagoda. As for controlling the entire divine pagoda, he was currently too weak, far from enough. But even so, it was enough to make him go mad with excitement. Around an hour later, the golden light dimmed and the Origin Divine Formation calmed down. Ji Tianxing was completely exhausted. He hurriedly sat in the middle of the array and consumed a few pills to quickly recover his magic power. A day and a night passed. Ji Tianxing had recovered 80% of his energy and his mental state had also returned to normal. Full of anticipation and eagerness, he prepared to try activating the divine formation. Burial of Heaven reminded him, "You haven't grasped the Origin Divine Formation yet. You can only activate it. Before you activate the divine array, you have to think it through. If you're transported away by the Origin Divine Gate, where will you appear?" Ji Tianxing chuckled. "Of course I won't be transported to the monster race's 33 heavens." Burial of Heaven choked for a moment before patiently advising, "If you're transported outside the divine pagoda, you'll be in the yin-yang secret realm and unable to leave. If you're transported to the 6th floor, there might be unknown dangers in the formation. There is also a king-level divine formation. If you're transported out of the secret realm, how will you enter the secret realm and return to the divine pagoda?" Ji Tianxing replied without hesitation, "If I'm transported out of the secret realm, I'll just come back and think of another way. If I'm transported out of the secret realm, I'll just go back home. I'll refine this divine pagoda after I break through to the martial god realm. I don't believe that anyone understands this divine pagoda better than I do. Could it be that there's someone who can snatch the divine pagoda before me?" Burial of Heaven saw that he had already thought this through, so he didn't try to persuade him otherwise. Ji Tianxing didn't want to stay in this deathly stillness any longer, so he hurriedly activated the Origin Divine Formation. Whoosh! The Origin Divine Formation lit up with dazzling golden light and began to spin. The lines and diagrams on the ground immediately transformed into thousands of profound seals. A moment later, the formation released a dense white light that condensed into an Origin Divine Gate more than 3 meters tall. Ji Tianxing's heart was filled with anticipation as he stepped into the gate. Whoosh! In a flash of white light, he vanished. Chapter 1989. Swoosh! A flash of white light cut through the darkness. When the white light faded, a handsome young man in a white robe appeared in the darkness. Without a doubt he was Ji Tianxing. Something doesn't seem right? When Ji Tianqing landed on the ground, he realized that something was amiss when he saw the pitch-black surroundings. Beneath his feet were icy black stone slabs, and around him was a plaza shrouded in darkness. Not far in front of him was an enormous altar. It was 60 meters tall and spanned a radius of 3,000 meters. It was a majestic sight to behold. At the top of the altar stood a towering statue of the six-armed Vajra war god. Around the altar were over 1,000 monster statues of various shapes and sizes. They were all in prostration and worship at the Vajra war god on the altar. Such a familiar scene made Ji Tianqing realize it immediately. He'd been transported to the second level of the divine pagoda. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but roll his eyes with a wry smile. He'd considered several possibilities after entering the exalted divine sect. Perhaps he'd been transported to a secret realm or out of it. Or perhaps he'd been transported to a completely foreign place. But he'd never imagined that the exalted divine sect would send him back to the second level. Wasn't this a trap? However, Ji Tianqing didn't have time to feel depressed. He could clearly see that in the darkness ahead, there were dozens of scarlet and dark purple eyes staring at him in unison. 25 pairs of eyes brimming with killing intent were scattered around the altar. They were 25 strange-looking black-robed men who didn't look human. Black smoke swirled around them and they exuded a dangerous aura. Ji Tianqing was very sensitive to their auras and immediately recognized them. The 25 black-robed men were all experts of the Devil Clan, and they all had the strength of the Crossing Calamity realm. Damn it! They're demons from Dark North Mountain. Ji Shilua's speed is so fast that he's already reached the second level? Ji Tianqing immediately realized that these demonic experts were Demon Saint Ji Shilua's subordinates. When he thought of Ji Shilua, he subconsciously raised his head and looked at the top of the altar. Sure enough, there was a pitch-black beast standing at the top of the altar. The giant beast was covered in black scales and had sharp claws and wings. It also had a hooked tail just like the legendary Azura. When Ji Tianqing looked at it, it was also looking down at Ji Tianqing. Its scarlet eyes flashed with a cruel and bloodthirsty sneer. Human race. Ji Shilua's sharp and narrow mouth moved slightly as he spoke in a low and cold voice. It looked at Ji Tianqing with a mocking gaze and asked in broken continent common language, "Kid, tell this saint your identity and origin, and how did you enter this divine pagoda? Tell me the truth and I'll give you a quick death." Ji Tianqing looked at it with contempt and sneered, "Back then Patriarch Xuepao was just as arrogant as you. Later I crippled him. I guess he's living a life worse than death now. If you're tired of living, I'll fulfill your wish." Suddenly hearing these words, Jixuo's pupils constricted, and a fierce cold light flashed through them. His body trembled and it quickly reacted. "You fought with Patriarch Xuepao? You destroyed his Dharma body. You're from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Huanglong Daoist? No. Yes. You're Ji Tianqing. Since the day the ancestor demon god returned to the North Underworld Mountain, Ji Tianqing had been the greatest enemy of the demonic race. As the demon saint of the North Underworld Mountain, even if it had not seen Ji Tianqing with its own eyes, it knew Ji Tianqing's appearance. Ji Shilua stared at Ji Tianqing and compared him with the portrait he had seen before. It immediately confirmed Ji Tianqing's identity. At first it was startled, then it was filled with excitement, revealing a look of intense excitement. "I didn't expect that a damned human worm like you would also enter the divine pagoda. I originally planned to go to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to kill you after exploring the arcane realm. I didn't expect to meet you here. That's great, the two matters can be settled at once." Ji Shilua grinned coldly and a cold murderous aura surged from his body. He flapped a pair of wide black Azura wings and released endless demonic fog, covering a radius of 10 miles to prevent Ji Tianqing from escaping. Then he waved his sharp claws and gave orders to the demonic powerhouses around the altar. "Let's go together and capture him alive. I want to capture him alive and bring him back to the North Underworld Mountain to receive my reward." The 25 demonic powerhouses immediately accepted the order and took out their magic treasures and weapons. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Everyone attacked Ji Tianqing from all directions, using their secret techniques and secret techniques. Purple, red, and black magic shadows, as well as all kinds of secret magic of the Devil Clan, poured down from the sky. The area within a radius of 10 miles was illuminated. The ground was dazzling purple as if it was stained with blood. Ji Tianqing was in the center of the storm. He was surrounded by 25 powerhouses in the tribulation stage, but he was not afraid. It just so happens that I haven't had a chance to test my skills before. Since I met you, it's your destiny to die. I'll use you to test my skills. He sneered. A black light flashed in his right hand, and the sword of burial of heaven appeared out of thin air. Swing the sword. The sword of burial of heaven swung and slashed out 1,000-foot-long silver light. Like a crescent moon, it swept across the demonic powerhouses. Bang bang bang. The sky was full of magic shadows, all kinds of demonic light, blood light and black fog. They were all defeated by the silver sword light and collapsed on the spot. More than 10 demonic powerhouses were swept by the sword light and flew back screaming. Only a few scattered saber lights and sword shadows landed on Ji Tianqing's body, producing a series of muffled sounds. However, Ji Tianqing was safe and sound. His physical body was too strong, and his defense was comparable to that of a martial sage. Ordinary people could not hurt him. The joint attack formation of the demonic powerhouses was broken by Ji Tianqing in one move. Among them, a dozen or so demons were either lightly or heavily injured. At the top of the altar, Ji Shilua was watching the battle with a cold smile on his face. When he suddenly saw this scene, the cold smile on his face instantly froze. His eyes widened, revealing an extremely shocked expression. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have dared to believe that Ji Tianqing's strength was actually so strong. He was comparable to a martial sage powerhouse and was evenly matched with him. This is impossible. Back then, Patriarch Xuepao said that he was injured by Huanglong Daoist. Could it be that this old man deliberately hid the truth in order not to lose face? This thought flashed through his mind, and Ji Shilua suddenly understood something. Just as he was in a daze, Ji Tianqing had already used his unique skill and started to kill. Heavenly Dragon Palm. 7 Stars Sword. He struck out a golden dragon with his left palm and blasted toward the demonic powerhouses on the left. He waved the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and stabbed out 49-star divine fire, killing more than 10 demons on the right. Those demonic powerhouses were all the elites of the North Underworld Mountain. They only had the strength of the second or third layer of the tribulation stage. How could they resist Ji Tianqing's divine power? Chapter 1990. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 demon clan experts were sent flying by Ji Tianqing. All of them were severely injured. They were either covered in blood or bleeding from their 7 orifices. It was proven that although Ji Tianqing was only at stage 8 of the Crossing Calamity Realm, his combat strength was comparable to a martial sage. Moreover, the secret skills that he had mastered were difficult for ordinary martial sages to deal with. Ji Shilua finally came to his senses. He was shocked and angry. He no longer dared to underestimate Suemo. He roared and flapped his black wings. He turned into a black ray of light and rushed toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, you damned thief, I'm going to tear you to shreds. As it roared, it waved its pair of sharp claws and shot out sharp blades of black light that covered the sky towards Ji Tianqing like a hurricane. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The black light blades cut the night sky within 1,000 feet. Dozens of space cracks appeared. The power of the Azura demon sage's attack was extraordinary. Ji Tianqing was in the mood to kill. When he saw Ji Shilua rushing toward him, he did not dodge. Instead, he took the initiative to meet him. You have just become a martial sage. How dare you call yourself a martial sage? Do you have any shame? Golden Rock Dance Sky-Splitting Sword. Ji Tianqing shouted angrily. A pair of golden wings appeared on his back. It was his battle robe that had transformed into a pair of wings. He had not used this secret skill for a long time. Now that the skill had changed, its power was even greater than before. The golden wings flapped and hundreds of golden light blades slashed at the black light blades in the sky. There were muffled sounds. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands. His essence, chi, and spirit merged and slashed out a giant silver sword that was 1,000 feet long. The giant sword was formed by the power of stars. It was surrounded by silver divine fire and was extremely powerful. Swoosh. In 1/5 of an instant, the giant sword cut through the sky and hit Ji Shilua. Boom. With a loud bang, Ji Shilua was sent flying back by the giant sword and landed heavily on the wasteland outside the square. The ground was smashed into a deep pit, and the surrounding area was split open, causing sand and stones to fly into the air. Ji Tianqing had thought that his sword would cut Ji Shilua in half. Even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. However, he had underestimated Ji Xiluo's strength, especially his defense. When the giant sword struck Ji Xiluo, it folded its black wings to protect itself. The enormous sword condensed from the star divine flames cut open a wound on its wings, revealing dark purple demonic bones. A large amount of demonic blood flowed out. However, its wings were not severed and its injuries were not serious. After falling to the ground, it rolled a few times and got up. It charged at Ji Tianqing even more furiously, but its combat power was not weakened by much. Little bastard, I'll show you my Azura ultimate skill. Azura Phantom. Ji Xiluo was completely enraged. He no longer held back and used his trump card. He no longer released any spells. Instead, he pressed his body in front of Ji Tianqing and engaged in close combat. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, his figure flashed 18 times around Ji Tianqing, leaving behind 18 phantoms. Each phantom had a different attacking posture. They stretched out their sharp claws, either stabbing or clawing at Ji Tianqing's vital points. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled sounds echoed in the night sky. Although Ji Tianqing tried his best to dodge, he was still hit 9 times. His body trembled as he was sent flying 5 kilometers away. When he landed on the ground, his white robe was in tatters, and there were 9 bloody marks on his pale golden skin. Fortunately, his physical body had been tempered hundreds of times and was comparable to a martial sage. Otherwise, he would have been torn to pieces by Ji Xiluo. The Azura demon clan is indeed extraordinary. Ji Tianqing put away his disdainful expression and muttered in a gloomy tone. He knew very well that the Azura Dao of the demon clan was best at close combat. The demon race powerhouses that cultivated the Azura Dao had an inconceivable level of physical defense, strength, reaction speed, and explosive power. In all the worlds, only the Dragon clan could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Azura Dao of the demon clan. Legend had it that there were demon clan elites who did not cultivate the dermic powers of heaven and earth. They only relied on their physical bodies to become saints. According to Ji Tianqing's knowledge, only the Dragon clan and the Azura demon clan could do that. Ji Xiluo's attack succeeded. He grinned coldly and said, I said just now that I'll tear you to pieces. You won't be able to escape. With that, he turned into a ray of black light again and charged at Ji Tianqing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Another 18 Azura phantoms appeared and surrounded Ji Tianqing. They attacked Ji Tianqing's vital points from all angles in the most violent manner. Ji Tianqing no longer defended passively. He used his secret technique without hesitation. Celestial Dragon Body. Roar. With a dragon's roar, Ji Tianqing's body emitted a golden light that shot into the sky. He instantly turned into a 30-foot-tall giant. Dazzling golden light swirled around his body like a layer of golden armor. He was like a god of war in golden armor. He exuded a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Whether it was defense, strength, or speed, they all increased by several times. Without hesitation, he swung his fists and raised his feet. He punched out 12 times in an instant and kicked out 16 times. Bam 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 bam. The golden light from his fists and feet collided with the Azura phantoms. There was a deafening explosion. Suddenly, the Azura phantoms collapsed and turned into a destructive shockwave that spread in all directions. The shockwave mixed with the golden light and the black light swept across the entire square. Nearly 1,000 demon statues in the square were immediately destroyed by the shockwave. They turned into dust that covered the sky and scattered in the night sky. Only the altar and the 6-armed Vajra war god statue on top of the altar were still intact. However, Ji Tianqing and Ji Xiluo were engaged in a fierce battle. They did not notice this. Neither of them used any spells. They relied solely on their physical strength and martial arts to launch the fiercest and most violent battle. Every punch and kick, every move would collide fiercely. They did not give in at all. This was the most bloody battle but also the most dangerous one. The slightest mistake would result in serious injuries or even the destruction of one's physical body. Bam, bam. Loud noises rang out continuously. Violent shockwaves kept exploding in the night sky. In just a short span of 100 breaths, the two of them had exchanged more than 1,000 moves. They had suffered serious injuries all over their bodies. Ji Tianqing's chest, back, limbs, and head were all left with streaks of blood that kept oozing out. The clothes and hair on his body had been destroyed long ago. Ji Shilua was in an even more miserable state. More than a dozen of the bones in his wings were broken and his barbed tail was broken. The bones in his chest were all shattered and deeply caved in. Purple demonic blood flowed out of its mouth and nose. The more Ji Shilua fought, the more frightened he became. His expression also became uglier. Close combat was his forte. It was also the ultimate skill he was proud of and the source of his confidence. However, a human who was several times weaker than the Devil Clan was actually fighting it in close combat with the Devil Clan. More importantly, this human's strength, defense, and martial arts were superior to his. He was beaten to a pulp. Chapter 1991. Damn bastard. How can his defense and strength be so strong? Could he have broken through to the martial sage realm and cultivated the dragon tribe's secret killing technique? Ji Shilua retreated to the east side of the altar. While he was panting, he pondered in shock. He could tell that Ji Tianxing was using the dragon tribe's combat technique. Every move was accompanied by the sound of a dragon's roar. Golden light flashed and the shadow of a divine dragon appeared. Ji Shilua thought to himself, could this kid be from the dragon tribe? Only the dragon tribe would have such a strong physical body and such a marvelous combat technique. But the demon god never mentioned that this kid is from the dragon tribe. Could he have hidden it too well? Thinking of this, Ji Shilua decided that after returning to the North Underworld Mountain, he would definitely report this top-secret information to the ancestral devil god. At that moment, Ji Tianxing flew out from the darkness and looked down at Ji Shilua from above. He let out a scornful laugh. What bullshit Azura demon god is he? He is just a dog and a chicken that can't withstand a single blow. Ji Shilua, if you have any other trump cards, use them now. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. Ji Tianxing's body shone with a golden light and the shadow of a dragon appeared behind him. Roar. The 100-zhang-tall golden dragon phantom let out a dragon roar that could pierce through gold and shatter stone. Ji Tianxing also used all his strength and slashed at Ji Shilua with the Burial of Heaven sword. Heavenly Dragon Slash. At that moment, Su Mo's strength exploded and gathered on the Burial of Heaven sword. The Burial of Heaven sword shone with a sacred golden light and formed a giant sword that was 100 feet long. With the power to destroy everything, it slashed at Ji Shilua's head. The golden light cut through the darkness and tore the night sky apart. Before the giant sword arrived, the unparalleled suppressive force suppressed Ji Shilua until his body trembled and his feet sank into the ground. Ji Shilua looked up at the giant sword. His pupils constricted and his expression was extremely solemn. It knew very well that if it was hit by this sword, even if it didn't die, it would be heavily injured. At the critical moment, he had no choice but to use a forbidden secret technique at all costs. Burning Blood Divinity, Azura Fist of the Great Demonic God. As it let out a furious roar, its entire body ignited with soaring blood flames. It ignited its own blood essence, causing its power to increase by more than 3 times. The price of using this secret technique was the loss of 50 years of cultivation. Die. Ji Shilua let out a furious roar and brandished a pair of cold, pitch-black fists, recklessly smashing towards Ji Tianxing. A long blood-red tail of flame trailed behind it. Like a meteor streaking across the night sky, it collided with the giant sword. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out, echoing for hundreds of miles. The giant golden sword instantly crumbled, turning into millions of golden fragments that scattered in all directions. Ji Tianxing was pushed back by the horrifying power. He was sent tumbling backward and fell into the wasteland 20 miles away. Ji Shilua's wrists were cut off on the spot by the giant sword. His 2 sharp claws exploded into countless black pieces that scattered in the night sky. Several cracks appeared on the black shell on his chest. Purple demonic blood spurted out. He was heavily injured and in great pain. His combat power was also weakened. The extremely violent impact blasted out a deep crater with a radius of dozens of miles on the ground. Ji Shilua was covered in blood. He was sent flying dozens of miles away by the shockwave. Sand, dust, and gravel covered the entire wasteland. The violent impact surged into the darkness at the edge of the wilderness and immediately dissipated. After a full 100 breaths, the earth-shaking commotion gradually stopped. At the same time, the heavily injured Ji Shilua took the opportunity to burrow into the altar in the middle of the wilderness. Whoosh! In a flash, he escaped from the 2nd floor of the divine pagoda and disappeared without a trace. A moment later, Ji Tianxing turned into a streak of golden light. He flew out of the darkness and landed on the altar. During this period of time he went to take care of a dozen or so surviving demons. Of the 20 or so demon experts, a dozen or so had been killed by the shockwaves of the battle. They had long been reduced to ashes. The remaining dozen or so had fled with serious injuries, but they did not escape Ji Tianxing's slaughter. At this point the 20 or so demon experts were all dead. Only Ji Shilua was left. He had fled without a trace. Ji Tianxing had also returned to his original appearance. He was 7 feet tall, wore a white robe and held the sword of burial of heaven. His aura was valiant and domineering. It was a pity that the long hair that had been destroyed had yet to grow back, making him look a little battered. He was only slightly injured. After circulating his energy and adjusting his breathing for a moment, he was already fine. Standing on the altar, he bent down to look at the drop of demon blood on the ground. He could not help but frown and mutter, "That damn Ji Shua, he actually escaped? No. I can't give him a chance to breathe. I have to kill him completely while he's heavily injured." Ji Tianxing was determined to kill him. He had decided to eliminate the source of trouble. However, he was a little hesitant. He could not determine where Ji Shilua had escaped to. Did he go to the 3rd floor of the Divine Pagoda? Or did he return to the 1st floor of the Divine Pagoda? When I first came here, Ji Shilua and those demons were around the altar. They seemed to be breaking the formation. I wonder if Ji Shilua has broken the formation? Although Ji Tianxing thought so, he was sure that Ji Shilua had most likely failed to break the formation. Even if he had escaped, he must have fled back to the 1st floor of the Divine Pagoda. Thus, Ji Tianxing waved his palm and released a golden light. He cast a spell to activate the formation. Swoosh! With a flash of light, Ji Tianxing passed through the formation and left the 2nd floor of the Divine Pagoda. The next moment he appeared on the 1st floor of the Divine Pagoda, standing in the square. Behind him were the statues of the 2 sages of Yin and Yang. Darkness surrounded him. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and spread it around, searching for Ji Shilua's traces. However, there were no traces of blood on the ground. There was also no trace of demonic qi in the air. Ji Tianxing was unwilling to give up. He quickly left the square and began a careful search of the surrounding buildings. He spent 4 hours carefully inspecting the thousands of houses and palaces twice. In the end, he still could not find any trace of Ji Shilua. The facts proved that Ji Shilua had not returned to the 1st floor of the Divine Pagoda. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. His expression darkened as he pondered. Since he's not on the 1st floor, it's very likely that he escaped to the 3rd floor. That damn Ji Shilua. I didn't expect him to have broken the formation. Of course, there's another possibility. Ji Shilua escaped from the Divine Pagoda and is hiding in the mystic realm. After making up his mind, Ji Tianxing cast a spell to activate the formation and left the 1st floor of the Divine Pagoda. Swoosh! With a flash of light, he returned to the 2nd floor. His surroundings had not changed. Both the altar and the wasteland were the same as before. Swoosh! With another flash of light, Ji Tianxing passed through the formation and left the 2nd floor of the Divine Pagoda. The next moment he appeared on the 3rd floor of the Divine Pagoda. He was also surrounded by a wasteland shrouded in endless darkness. Not far ahead was the mysterious Golden Crow's tomb. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and spread it around, searching for Ji Shilua's traces and flying towards the Golden Crow's tomb. Chapter 1992. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 balls of dazzling 5-colored brilliance flew in front of him in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianxing took a closer look and saw a few figures wrapped in the 2 balls of light. They were not demons but ordinary human powerhouses. There were a total of 4 people, and all of them had the strength of a Tribulation Realm cultivator. There are other people who have entered the tower? Ji Tianxing frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. How can those Tribulation Realm cultivators break the sacred array at the entrance of the mystic realm? Moreover, they have entered the 3rd level of the tower? Only the people of the Broken Sky Alliance can do that. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianxing determined the other party's identity. Sure enough, the 4 Tribulation Realm powerhouses were all wearing purple robes with the emblem of the Broken Sky Alliance. They were the elite powerhouses of the Broken Sky Alliance. They took out their weapons and Dharma treasures and surrounded Ji Tianxing, emitting a strong sense of hostility. Ji Tianxing knew them and had fought with them before. The four purple-robed powerhouses also hated Ji Tianqing very much, glaring angrily at him. Ji Tianqing glanced at the four of them and shouted in a dignified tone, "How can trash like you enter the tower? How dare you make an enemy of me? Where's Qin Haishan? Ask him to come and see me. He's got guts, huh?" If Ji Tianqing had shouted like this a few days ago, the four powerhouses would have been afraid and fearful. But now not only did they not have the slightest fear, they even sneered contemptuously. "Ha! Kid, you still dare to be so arrogant, you really don't know what's good for you. Looks like you haven't seen the situation clearly. Are you still trying to intimidate others with your connections? You're really shameless. How dare you lie that you're friends with our alliance leader? Are you worthy?" The four powerhouses had been humiliated before, and their hearts were filled with resentment and hatred. Now that he had someone backing him up, he naturally wanted to vent his anger and ridicule Ji Tianqing to his heart's content. Ji Tianqing saw through the clues and his eyes became colder. He asked, "You were so humble before, but now you are so arrogant. It seems like you found someone to back you up?" As his voice fell, a confident and arrogant voice came from the dark sky in front of him. "That's right. You're not that stupid after all. You finally understand." Hearing this voice, Ji Tianqing looked up at the night sky. He saw a middle-aged man in a gray-white robe leisurely walking over. This person was 7 feet tall and had a pale face. His long hair was tied into a ponytail and he had a white beard on his chin. His face was thin and his eyes were malicious. His entire body was emitting a powerful aura. Ji Tianqing immediately judged that the man's strength had reached the martial sage realm. Behind the middle-aged man were a few elite experts of the Heaven-Shattering Alliance. Qin Haishan was among them. The middle-aged man's attitude was arrogant, and Qin Haishan and the few purple-robed powerhouses were very respectful to him. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed that the middle-aged man's status was definitely higher than Qin Haishan's. In the Broken Sky Alliance, only the patrol envoy and the elders have a higher status than the branch leader. Usually the elders do not show themselves easily. Only the patrol envoys are active outside. Seems like this guy is most likely the patrol envoy of the Broken Sky Alliance. In the blink of an eye, Tianshang, Qin Haishan, and the rest arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. The 12 purple-robed powerhouses spread out and surrounded Ji Tianqing. Tianshang and Qin Haishan stood in the night sky, 1,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing. They looked at each other coldly. Ji Tianqing glanced at Tianshang and said in a mocking tone, "No wonder these people are so arrogant and dare to challenge me. Turns out that they have someone backing them up. But I don't know if this new backer is qualified enough." Hearing this, Qin Haishan was enraged. His eyes flashed with shame and anger. He glared at Ji Tianqing and scolded, "Kid, you made up a lie to deceive me and made me think that you were friends with our alliance leader. I'm not afraid of you. I'm just giving you some leeway out of respect for our alliance leader. Now that your lie has been exposed, let's see what other tricks you can play." Ji Tianqing smiled playfully and nodded, "You're right. I did lie to you. I'm not friends with Wu Duantian. Because Wu Duantian is not qualified to be my friend." He was telling the truth. However, when Tianshang, Qin Haishan and the rest heard this, they were instantly filled with anger. Everyone glared at him. Even Tianshang, who was the most shrewd, glared at him with a sharp gaze. His entire body was filled with a thick murderous intent. "Kid, you're so arrogant that you're ignorant. Other than the 3 martial gods, no one else dared to say such a thing. And you dare to insult our alliance leader. No matter what your background is, you'll have to pay the price today." As he spoke, Tianshang took 2 steps forward. An invisible aura burst out from his body and charged toward Ji Tianqing like a furious dragon. An invisible pressure swept over like a stormy sea and a violent hurricane, fiercely attacking Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing did not move at all. His clothes and hair did not even flutter. Tianshang's aura was ineffective against him. Ji Tianqing smirked and said to Tianshang, "You want me to pay the price? Are you qualified?" Tianshang exuded a strong sense of confidence. With a powerful aura, he shouted, "I, Tianshang, am more than enough to kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his palms and shot out a 5-colored brilliance. 2 mountain-sized palm shadows were formed and slammed toward Ji Tianqing. Heaven-suppressing seal. The 200 feet tall palm shadows were like the palms of a deity. They exploded with power that could suppress everything. Ji Tianqing was fearless. With his left hand behind his back, he raised his right hand and extended his index finger and middle finger. Sky-piercing finger. Blinding golden light burst out from his two fingers. They were like two giant swords that pierced toward the two palm shadows. Boom. Crack. The palm shadows and the giant swords collided. There was a deafening sound that sounded like a thunderclap. The two attacks exploded at the same time. They turned into dense light fragments that scattered in all directions. Violent five-colored air waves swept across the entire wasteland. Other than Xianxia, who could stay and watch the battle, the other 12 purple-robed powerhouses all retreated far away to avoid being injured by the aftershocks of the battle. Xianxia and Heavenly Slayer exchanged a move, and they were actually evenly matched, unable to distinguish the upper hand. Xianxia's expression changed. His pupils constricted. He said in a cold voice, "You do have some ability. No wonder you're so arrogant." Xianxia looked at him with disdain and said, "If you're afraid, kneel down and apologize to me. I can spare your life." Xianxia was so angry that his face turned black. His expression became ferocious. Killing intent surged from his body. "Little bastard, you're courting death." Chapter 1993. Hearing Xianxia's words, Xianxia immediately raised his eyebrows and revealed a mocking expression. "Oh, so courageous? Then you'll have to change your name. You can write it backwards from now on. However, you're already a dead man, so your name isn't important anymore." As he spoke, Xianxia raised his fists and punched at Heaven's Slayer. Star-shattering fist. Silver star divine fire burst out of his fists, forming two massive fist auras that streaked across the night sky like meteors. Heaven's Slayer didn't dare to be careless. He immediately counterattacked. Both of his hands formed hand seals and waved rapidly, forming a profound seal. Indefinite divine spear. He roared angrily and pointed his sword fingers 3 times, shooting out 6 dark golden beams of light towards Xianxia. Each dark golden light formed a golden spear shadow that was hundreds of feet long. They stabbed toward Xianxia's vital points. The shadow of the spear was constantly changing, making it hard for one to grasp and dodge. The biggest characteristic of Heaven's Slayer's secret technique was that it was unpredictable and impossible to guard against. Xianxia released his divine sense to determine the trajectory of the spear shadows. However, he couldn't do it at all. He immediately realized the essence of the secret technique. Thus, he decisively unfolded his battle robe. Swoosh! Golden light flashed behind him and a pair of wide golden wings appeared. Golden rock wings. The golden wings instantly closed and wrapped around him, protecting him. The 6 spear shadows hit the golden wings one after another. Boom, 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 boom. Instantly, the spear shadows shattered into countless golden fragments that scattered in the night sky. The golden rock wings were undamaged. Xianxia wasn't hurt. However, the incomparably powerful force of impact sent him flying 1,000 meters away. Heaven's Slayer didn't let him go. He roared and chased after him. Aurora instant kill. He roared angrily and formed hand seals with both hands. He activated 100% of his power and formed a blazing white sword that was hundreds of feet long. Kill. Following his shout, the blazing white sword of light that was hundreds of meters long pierced towards Xianxia with a divine might that seemed capable of piercing through everything. At the same time, Xianxia had just retracted his golden rock wings. Seeing the blazing white light sword coming at him, he furrowed his brows and raised his left palm without hesitation, using his trump card. God-slaying spear. Golden divine flames gushed out of his left palm and condensed into a golden divine spear that was 100 feet long. The golden divine spear stabbed toward the sword of light. In the blink of an eye, the god-slaying spear and the blazing white light sword collided, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Boom! In that instant, the white light shattered and rose into the air like a mushroom cloud. The wasteland within a radius of a few dozen kilometers was instantly illuminated by the white light. A violent shockwave swept across the entire wasteland. Even Xianxia was unable to withstand it and was blasted back 1,000 feet. The weaker purple-robed experts were sent flying, each of them spitting out blood. A few of those who were closer to the scene were seriously injured and covered in blood. Xianxia was still standing where he was. He did not move an inch and was not injured at all. However, Tian's slaying was hit by the god-slaying spear. A bloody hole appeared in his left arm and he let out a painful groan. He was sent flying for more than a dozen kilometers and fell at the end of the wasteland. He struggled to get up, his hair disheveled. He was in a sorry state. Damn bastard. How is this possible? How could he possibly hurt me? Tian Slang's eyes were red with anger. He could not accept his failure as he growled in disbelief. When he looked up at Ji Tianxing again, his face was contorted. His expression was ferocious as he roared, "Everyone attack together. Today we will not stop until we tear him into pieces." Xianxia and the other 11 purple-robed experts immediately acknowledged the order. They did not care about their own injuries. They waved their swords and Dharma treasures wildly and released earth-shattering Dharma spells to attack Ji Tianxing from all directions. Swish swish swish. The earth-shattering Dharma spells lit up the entire wasteland. Violent and devastating magic power fluctuations surged in the wasteland. Ji Tianxing was surrounded, but he was calm. He made a spell with his left hand and held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand. He started his counterattack. 7 Stars Sword. 5-colored Divine Thunder. He waved his sword with his right hand and shot out 49 rays of sword light to destroy the Dharma spells. He waved his left hand and shot out 5-colored lightning toward the purple-robed experts. Bang, bang, bang. The attacks of the 11 purple-robed experts were all defeated on the spot. 4 of them were enveloped by the 5-colored lightning. With a series of crackling sounds, the 4 of them were scorched by the lightning. They twitched in pain. Such a tragic scene did not scare Xianxia and the others away. Instead, it aroused their ferocity. Xianxia roared. He held his broadsword with both hands and charged toward Ji Tianxing without caring about anything else. The purple-robed experts followed closely behind. They formed a battle formation and attacked Ji Tianxing from all sides. Ji Tianxing summoned a pair of mother-child shuttles. He cast a spell and activated the power of the shuttles to attack Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was fighting with Xianxia and the others. Suddenly, an extremely dangerous aura came from behind him. A wisp of cold silver light silently attacked and stabbed towards the back of his head. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing sensed the danger and immediately slashed behind him. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out. The Sword of Burial of Heaven blocked the cold light accurately. The cold light was sent flying, but it split into 2 rays of cold light. A larger ray of cold light flew to the left. The smaller ray of cold light brushed past Ji Tianxing's arm and flew to the right. Instantly, the white robe on his arm was torn. A bloody mark was left on his skin and a few drops of blood seeped out. Damn you, despicable person. Mother-child shuttles. Ji Tianxing looked down at his arm, then turned to look at Heaven Slaying and cursed coldly. Broken Moon Sword. He was completely enraged. Killing intent burst out of his body as he slashed at Xianxia and the others. With a loud boom, the 3 purple-robed experts were hit by the sword light and were cut in half. Ji Tianxing broke through the encirclement and charged at Heaven Slaying with his sword. Heaven Slaying also came forward, holding a crescent-shaped saber and fighting him head-on. The 2 figures immediately intertwined and clashed fiercely. Xianxia and the other purple-robed experts assisted Heaven Slaying in battle, occasionally releasing Dharma spells to attack. Everyone was fighting fiercely and used their full strength. No one noticed that in a corner of the wasteland, in the darkness, a pair of scarlet eyes were staring at the battle in the sky. Below it was the corpse of a purple-robed expert. It was already in tatters and its flesh and blood had dried up. And this pitch-black monster's wrist was recovering at a visible rate, growing a pair of sharp claws. Soon, another purple-robed expert was knocked unconscious by Ji Tianxing and fell to the edge of the wasteland. The pitch-black monster hurriedly flew over, silently picked up the purple-robed expert, and hid in the darkness at the end of the wasteland. Chapter 1994. 15 minutes passed by very quickly. Ji Tianxing and Heavenly Slayer exchanged more than 1,000 moves before the victor was finally decided. Heavenly Slayer's crescent blade was already cut in 2 and fell into the wasteland. He was covered in blood all over, his grayish-white long robe also turned dark red. His head of long hair was disheveled, appearing very wretched. His 4 limbs, chest and back were all covered in horrifying wounds, deep to the bone. His left leg in particular had been cut off from below the knee and was bleeding profusely. These were just physical injuries. Although they were serious, they were not fatal. What truly reduced his combat strength was the injuries to his divine soul. His divine soul suffered heavy injuries repeatedly, and his consciousness was already blurry. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing's situation was clearly much more relaxed. His long hair draped over his shoulders, his white robe was dyed with blood. Several wounds were left on his arms and chest. Apart from this, there were no other injuries on his body. His divine soul was still clear, his strength surging. During the process of the two people fighting, Qin Haishan and the purple-robed powerhouses surrounded and attacked Ji Tianxing without regard for their own safety. However, those purple-robed powerhouses were either injured by the aftershocks of the battle and blasted far away, or they were killed by Ji Tianxing, dying on the spot. Fighting until now, the 12 purple-robed powerhouses were all dead. Only Qin Haishan was still bitterly hanging on, fighting side by side with Heavenly Slayer. Qin Haishan's injuries were even more miserable. He was already a bloody man, his body contorted out of shape. He retreated to Heavenly Slayer's side and asked with a voice transmission while panting, "Lord Heavenly Slayer, what do we do now? This kid's strength far exceeds our imagination. Why don't we temporarily avoid the spearhead and have a decisive battle with him after our injuries are treated?" Very clearly, Qin Haishan already had thoughts of retreating and did not wish to continue fighting. He was very clear that he and Heavenly Slayer were not Ji Tianxing's match. Continuing to fight, he would die without a doubt. But he could not say escape directly and could only say it more tactfully. Heavenly Slayer naturally understood what he meant. Glaring at him with a belly full of anger, he scolded in a deep voice, "Qin Haishan, you blind bastard. After we leave the mystic realm, this seat will settle the score with you." Tianshang didn't want to be entangled any further and wanted to escape from the divine pagoda as soon as possible. However, what angered him the most was that Qin Haishan had lied about military intelligence. It was because of Qin Haishan's report that he had misjudged Ji Tianxing's strength. That was why he had ended up in such a miserable state. He felt that he had been cheated by Qin Haishan, so of course he was full of resentment. Qin Haishan knew what Heavenly Slayer was thinking, but he couldn't voice his bitterness. He could only cup his hands and say respectfully, "Lord Tianshang, it's my fault. As long as I can leave this secret realm, I'm willing to accept any punishment." Tian Slayer looked at the Golden Crow ancient tomb not far away and instructed Qin Haishan, "Qin Haishan, you go entangle that kid and try your best to stall for time. I need to activate the array formation of the tomb before I can leave this place." Qin Haishan's expression immediately changed drastically, and he hurriedly shook his head and said, "Lord Heavenly Slayer, that won't do. This subordinate strength is weak. How can I hold that brat back? In my opinion, only you, my lord, can hold that kid back. As long as you can stall for time, this subordinate can open the array formation." Qin Haishan was not stupid. He clearly knew that Tian Slayer wanted him to throw his life away, so how could he agree? Tian Slayer immediately glared at him and shouted sternly in a low voice, "Qin Haishan, this is my order. There's no room for negotiation. You actually dare to disobey? You know the consequences." As he said that, he emitted a cold, killing intent all over his body, pressing towards Qin Haishan. Qin Haishan's body trembled, his expression becoming very ugly. His eyes also revealed a look of despair. He understood Tian Slayer's nature and methods. He was also a vicious and merciless character who killed without batting an eyelid. If he disobeyed, Tian Slayer would immediately execute the alliance rules and kill him on the spot. But if he obeyed, he would lose his life in Ji Tianxing's hands. It was death left and right. Qin Haishan weighed the pros and cons and simply steeled his heart, making up his mind. He looked at Tian Slayer with a determined gaze and said righteously, "Lord Tian Slayer, it's not that this subordinate is disobeying orders, but this is really inappropriate. I still think that the best decision is for you to stall for time while I activate the array." Obviously, Qin Haishan's fear of Ji Tianxing was far greater than his respect for Tian Slayer. He would rather suffer Tian Slayer's anger than fight with Ji Tianxing. Tian Slayer was so angry that his face turned pale. His eyes turned dark red like blood and his entire body was engulfed in raging flames. "Qin Haishan, you rebellious, disobedient, cowardly coward. I will kill you according to the alliance rules now." As he roared, Tian Slayer raised his right palm and accumulated a vast amount of dermic power. He was about to kill Qin Haishan with one strike. Qin Haishan hurriedly retreated and retorted mockingly, "I'm a coward? You're a patrol, a martial sage expert, but you don't dare to fight with a strong enemy. Instead you want me to die. Ask yourself who's the coward who's afraid of death. Since they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, Xianxia did not hide it anymore. He might as well make things clear and not give Tian Slayer any face. Tian Slayer flew into a rage out of humiliation. He was so furious that his entire body emitted a strong killing intent. Xianxia, you traitor. I'll kill you now and clean up the mess. As soon as he finished speaking, Tian Slayer struck out with his right palm toward Xianxia. Xianxia was already prepared. He turned and fled without hesitation. Boom! A golden palm the size of a house streaked across the night sky and struck Xianxia. Xianxia's dermic power shield collapsed immediately. The jade pendant around his neck shattered with a bang. He was sent flying, blood spurting out of his mouth and nose. However, he managed to preserve his life with the protection of the jade pendant. After he landed, he hurriedly got up and continued flying toward the Golden Crow's ancient tomb. Tian Slayer chased after him with a murderous aura. He had only flown halfway when he was stopped by 2 rays of sword light. A mocking sneer sounded from the night sky beside him. Aha, you can't beat me, so you're starting an internal conflict? Tian Slayer turned his head and saw Xianxia charging toward him with a sword in hand. His face was full of contempt. Tian Slayer was infuriated. He roared at the top of his lungs, "Little bastard, don't be so arrogant." As he spoke, he struck out with his fist toward the 2 rays of sword light. Bang! Bang! With 2 muffled explosions, the fist shadows collapsed. However, the sword light's power did not decrease. It continued to attack. Tian Slayer could only try his best to dodge. Zhoosh! The sword light brushed past his shoulder and cut off his right palm. Tian Slayer let out a painful cry. The veins on his forehead bulged. At this moment, Xianxia struck again with his sword and struck out a 5-colored lightning bolt. Tian Slayer did not have time to dodge at all. He was immediately struck by the 5-colored lightning bolt. Boom! Crack! With a thunderous boom, Heavenly Slayer's body exploded into charcoal fragments that filled the sky. Chapter 1995. A ball of white fog the size of a fist floated in the night sky. It was Xianxia's soul. The life force of a martial saint was unimaginably strong. Xianxia had exchanged over 1,000 blows with Xianxia. He had used all his trump cards before he managed to destroy Xianxia's physical body. Even though Xianxia's soul was heavily injured, it was not so easy to kill him. Heaven-breaking sword. Xianxia chased after him. He slashed out a huge golden sword towards Xianxia's soul. Xianxia suddenly woke up. He immediately turned into a ray of white light and fled into the distance. Whoosh! The huge golden sword chased after him. It cut through the dark night sky and only hit him when it reached the end of the wasteland. Boom! With a muffled sound, the sword light hit Xianxia's soul. The ball of white fog distorted and flew thousands of feet away in the night sky. It then turned around and flew in the other direction. At the same time, the white fog released invisible soul ripples. They turned into 4 sharp spikes and attacked Xianxia. Xianxia was already prepared. He activated his soul power and formed 4 sharp swords to fight back. Bang! 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 4 muffled sounds exploded in the soul. Xianxia's soul attack was dispelled. He took the opportunity to flee 5 kilometers away. Xianxia did not give up. He held the Burial of Heaven sword and chased after him. They chased each other in the night sky. In 15 minutes they had circled the wasteland several times. Finally, Xianxia's soul was too heavily injured. He could no longer bear the burden. When Xianxia performed the soul-slashing sword technique and slashed out 18 sword lights, Xianxia's soul was finally cut into pieces and scattered in the night sky. The inspector of the Heaven-Breaking Alliance, a martial saint expert, had died just like that. Xianxia had created another miracle by killing a martial saint with his strength at the 8th stage of the Tribulation Passing Realm. However, this miracle was only known to him in the Burial of Heaven. It was destined not to spread. Xianxia waved his hand and shot out a beam of golden light, picking up Heavenly Slayer's soul fragment. The voice of the Burial of Heaven immediately sounded in his mind. The soul fragments of a martial saint expert are great nourishment. They can help me recover a lot of my strength. Xianxia didn't hesitate and directly gave the divine soul fragment to the Burial of Heaven to devour. Then he held the sword of burial of heaven and flew towards the golden crow tomb in the middle of the wasteland. At this moment, Xianxia was above the golden crow's tomb, casting his technique anxiously. After a full quarter of an hour he still couldn't open the array even after using all his strength. Seeing Tianshang being killed with his own eyes, he was so worried that his soul almost left his body. When he saw Ji Tianxing rushing over, he became even more flustered. His eyes were filled with despair. Shua. In the next moment, Ji Tianxing arrived behind Xianxia and stopped in the night sky. He looked at Xianxia expressionlessly and said coldly, "Xianxia, your death is here. There's no need to struggle anymore." Xianxia's body stiffened and his expression turned ashen. He was filled with despair, grief, and anger. He slowly turned to look at Ji Tianxing and shook his head. "Senior, you can't blame me for this. I respect you greatly and wouldn't dare to disobey you in the slightest. It's all Heavenly Slayer's fault. He wanted to kill you. I was ordered by him." Since Heavenly Slayer was already dead, Xianxia didn't hesitate to twist the truth to save his life. However, Ji Tianxing didn't believe his nonsense. He laughed coldly. "Haha, do you think I'll believe you? Do you think I'm a merciful person?" Xianxia was even more shocked and shocked. The despair in his heart was even greater. He was so anxious that his eyes darted around, anxiously thinking of a way to save his life. However, after racking his brain for a long time, he realized that he didn't have any life-saving trump cards. What was even more tragic was that he was about to die, but he didn't even know the other party's identity and background. Helpless, he could only bring up the heaven-shattering alliance. "Senior, don't forget that you're friends with our alliance master. As long as you spare my life, our alliance will definitely remember this kindness." Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a cold smile. He said disdainfully, "Now you admit that Wu Duantian and I are friends? That's not what you said before. You're just a small branch leader. Don't think too highly of yourself. Furthermore, I've never put the heaven-shattering alliance in my eyes. Wu Duantian isn't worthy of being my friend." Since he said that, Xianxia also understood that he was completely hopeless. His heart was like dead ashes. He glared at Ji Tianxing with a ferocious gaze and laughed maniacally. Ah, kid, I admit that you're very strong, but you're too arrogant. Even if you don't put the heaven-shattering alliance in your eyes, you've killed me and Tianshang. You'll have to suffer the heaven-shattering alliance's revenge. We've already sent out a message to inform the elders of the heaven-shattering alliance about you. Just you wait, the elders will avenge us very soon. You won't live long either. Soon you'll be buried with us." Xianxia laughed maniacally. At the same time, he channeled all his magic power and soul to self-destruct. He was an expert at the 8th stage of the tribulation stage. Once he self-destructed, it would definitely destroy everything within a few hundred miles. The 3rd floor of the Divine Pagoda was only a few dozen miles in radius. Ji Tianxing had nowhere to hide. "Ha! Little bastard, let's die together." Xianxia laughed maniacally. His body ignited with 5 colored flames and expanded violently. Seeing that he was about to self-destruct, Ji Tianxing didn't retreat. Instead, he rushed forward like a stream of light. "Want to self-destruct in front of me? Too young." Ji Tianxing sneered disdainfully. He stretched out 2 fingers of his right hand and poked at Xianxia. Sky-piercing finger. The 2 fingertips emitted a dazzling golden light. It formed a sharp sword and instantly pierced Xianxia. Bang! The violently expanding Xianxia was like a balloon. He was instantly pierced by the sky-piercing finger. With a loud explosion, his body collapsed on the spot. It exploded into pieces and scattered in all directions. A violent 5-colored air wave wrapped around the pieces of flesh and swept across a few dozen miles. The hurricane filled the entire wasteland. It blew up gravel and dust. Xianxia's physical body and soul were completely destroyed. They turned into fine powder and scattered in the wasteland. Although he still exploded, it wasn't a self-destruction. The power was completely different. Ji Tianxing was swept by the shockwave. He was also unharmed. When the violent hurricane calmed down, the entire wasteland regained its peace. Originally, Ji Tianxing should have sat down and adjusted his breathing after killing all the people of the Heaven-Shattering Alliance. However, he didn't stop. He turned and flew to a corner of the wasteland. He shouted with a cold expression. "Jishuo, you coward! How long are you going to hide? He stared at the corner of the wasteland with a sharp gaze. His body was filled with a strong murderous intent. In the corner of the wasteland there was a pile of broken bones. The ground was stained with blood. Chapter 1996. This pitch-black monster covered in scales was Zhou. It had been hiding in the rubble for a long time and witnessed the battle between Tianxing and Tianchong and the others. Beneath it, the ground was littered with bones and chunks of flesh, enough to form 7 corpses. Without a doubt, 7 of the 12 elites of the Heaven-Shattering Alliance had been killed by it. The souls and blood essences of these 7 experts were also completely devoured by it. A pair of sharp claws grew out of its broken wrist. They were as black and sharp as before. Hearing Tianxing's words, Xiluo's eyes were filled with murderous intent. It stopped hiding its aura and crawled out from the rubble. Whoosh! With a flash of blood, Xiluo flew into the night sky and stood 5 kilometers away from Tianxing. It stared at Tianxing ferociously and sneered, I didn't think that not only did you chase me here, you even discovered me long ago. However, this is the worst decision you've made in your life and you're about to regret it. Tianxing curled his lips and sneered disdainfully, You're the one who's going to regret it. The stupidest decision you've made in your life was to enter this divine tower. Because this is where you're going to be buried. Xiluo stood proudly and exuded a powerful and domineering aura. What a joke. Tianxing, with your current state, how could you have the courage to speak such nonsense? You've fought with the Heaven-Shattering Alliance's martial saint and are heavily injured, and your strength has dropped by half. Meanwhile, I've recovered 80% of my strength, so killing you is as easy as pie. Tianxing disdained to argue with it. With his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the burial of heaven, he pointed it at the ground and said proudly, Xiluo, there's no point in talking anymore. Hand over your life. As soon as he finished speaking, he channeled his vast magic power and released a vast amount of divine lightning, slashing with all his might. The path of martial arts is endless, but the path of the sword is eternal. With just one sword, I defeated all the geniuses of the myriad worlds and killed all those who betrayed me. My sword can split the heavens and earth, change the sun and moon and kill the gods. Godslayer sword. Even though Tianxing had fought a great battle, his mana was still vigorous and his battle prowess was outstanding. He was full of vigor as he spoke these overbearing words in a clear and loud voice. Every time he spoke, his aura would double, and his sword intent would become more condensed. When the words God-slaying sword came out of his mouth, his aura reached its peak and his sword intent took form. The sword of burial of heaven slashed out a 1,000-meter-long giant sword with dazzling white light. Along with a sky full of sword shadows, it slashed down from the sky towards Xiluo. This sword technique was the 8th move of the burial of heaven's 9 swords, God-slaying sword. And the sky full of golden and red sword shadows was Tianxing's sword intent. It represented absolute majesty and dominance, as well as the courage to press forward with indomitable will. Today Tianxing had finally mastered the sword intent that he had comprehended for many years. Swoosh! The god-slaying sword fell from the sky and the wilderness was in chaos. The ground cracked and dust flew up into the sky. Xiluo endured the suppression of the sword intent. His body trembled violently and his face was distorted. He immediately widened his eyes, revealing a look of horror. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Sword intent. The fusion of will and sword technique. Only a sword sage can master sword intent. You're so young. How could you have comprehended such a powerful sword intent? You and that person from 1,000 years ago." Seeing Tianxing in high spirits and the god-slaying sword's invincible power, Xiluo immediately thought of that sword Dao legend from 1,000 years ago. Xiluo had never seen that sword Dao legend with his own eyes. But he was sure that the sword Dao legend from back then was nothing more than this. At this critical moment, Xiluo did not dare to think too deeply. He hurriedly used a secret technique to block the power of the god-slaying sword. Heavenly demon protection. He shouted in a low voice. His claws formed a strange posture and his body surged with demonic aura. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black shield formed and protected him. The shield flashed with a cold light, and 6 ferocious heavenly demon shadows flashed. This was the demon race's saint-level secret technique, one of their strongest defensive techniques. In the next moment, the god-slaying sword fell from the sky and struck the black shield. Bam! With a deafening sound, the black shield collapsed on the spot and more than 10 cracks appeared. Crack! The black shield could not withstand the destructive blow. It shattered into billowing black fog and scattered in the wilderness. Ji Shilua was also cut down. He fell from the sky and crashed into the wilderness, creating a huge crater in the ground and sending countless rocks flying. He struggled for a while, but before he could get up, he opened his mouth and spat out black blood, mixed with countless pieces of his internal organs. Clearly, the god-slaying sword's tyrannical slash through the shield caused him to suffer a backlash. His internal organs and blood vessels were shattered inch by inch. From his chest and abdomen he felt as if he was being stabbed by knives and needles. Ji Shilua's body bent over as he let out a painful groan. He hurriedly circulated his energy to suppress his injuries. He flapped his wings and flew out of the crater. However, before he could fly back into the night sky, Ji Tianxing descended from the sky and attacked again. White Tiger's Sacred Sword. The sword of burial of heaven became a giant sword thousands of feet tall. Ji Tianxing's body also surged with golden light, and he became one with the giant sword. The giant sword fell from the sky, bringing with it the image of a white tiger as huge as a mountain. Came crashing down like a meteor. Ji Shilua looked up at the sky and saw the white tiger sacred sword coming down. It was too late for him to dodge. His scarlet eyes were filled with anger and unwillingness. At the critical moment of life and death, he could only fold his black wings to protect his vitals. Boom! Crack! In the next moment, the white tiger sacred sword struck him and a thunderous sound rang out. Golden light burst forth and black fog drifted away. Another crater with a radius of more than 10 miles appeared in the wilderness. Dust flew everywhere. Ji Shilua's black wings were cut off on the spot. They shattered into several pieces and scattered in the crater. It had become a naked black monster, covered in wounds and blood, roaring furiously. Ji Tianxing did not stop. He took advantage of the situation and launched a fierce attack. He used all his strength to use his ultimate techniques, wanting to kill Ji Shilua. Vermilion Bird's Sacred Sword. Azure Dragon's Sacred Sword. Heaven's Splitting Sword. Five-colored Divine Lightning. The two of them fought fiercely in the wilderness. It was an extremely fierce battle. Ji Tianxing constantly let out low roars and used all kinds of trump cards. Ji Shilua was beaten back again and again. He had no strength to fight back and his injuries became more and more serious. After the two of them exchanged 200 blows, Ji Shilua's body was already distorted and on the verge of collapse. He collapsed weakly in the ruins, twitching violently. His body was covered in black demonic fog. Ji Tianxing descended from the sky. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed down fiercely. Ji Shilua was about to be killed on the spot. At this critical moment he did not dodge or counterattack. He was exceptionally calm. Chapter 1997. Heavenly Demon Jade Seed? Ji Tianxing was stunned. The sword of burial of heaven in his hands froze in mid-air. He looked at Ji Shilua with a gloomy expression. His eyes were as sharp as a sword, as if he wanted to see through him. Ji Shilua, did the ancestor Fiend Celestial impart the heavenly demon jade seed technique to you? Ji Shilua sneered and said proudly, not only me, every great demon saint has received the ancestor Fiend Celestial's impartation. I am not the patrol envoy of the Broken Sky Alliance. I am not as stupid and weak as him. You can kill him, but you can't kill me. Ji Tianxing was silent. He stared at Ji Shilua with a murderous look and frowned. 1,000 years ago he had heard of the heavenly demon jade seed technique and had even come into contact with it. He had a certain understanding of this powerful demon Dao secret technique. This kind of secret technique had many effects, but the two most prominent effects were something that the other clan's secret techniques could not compare to. One was to steal the cultivation of others, and the other was to bring the dead back to life. The ancestor Fiend Celestial had planted the heavenly demon seed in the divine souls of the great demon saints, creating a mysterious connection between them. Those great demon saints had become the seeds cultivated by the ancestor Fiend Celestial. Once a great demon saint died, the ancestor Fiend Celestial would obtain part of his cultivation, greatly increasing his power. Or, when the ancestor Fiend Celestial needed it, he could use the secret technique to steal the cultivation of the great demon saints. Ji Tianxing had read in a book that in ancient times, There was a great demon king who had been stuck in the martial god realm. No matter how hard he cultivated, he could not break through to the true god realm and wasted more than 2,000 years. Later, the great demon king picked 99 talented geniuses and took them in as his disciples. He used the heavenly demon jade seed technique to plant the heavenly demon seed in the bodies of the 99 disciples. 1,000 years later, the 99 disciples had become talents. Most of them had reached the martial saint realm, and only a few of them had remained in the tribulation realm. Thus, the great demon king used a secret technique to steal the cultivation of the disciples. It succeeded as expected, breaking through to the true God realm very quickly. The 99 disciples were all drained of their power and cultivation, suffering heavy casualties. This was one of the effects of the heavenly demon jade seed technique. It was very strange and overbearing. In addition, since Zhou Xian had practiced the heavenly devil jade seed technique, he must have left a spiritual soul seed in his lair in the North Underworld Mountain. Even if it was accidentally killed by a strong enemy while fighting outside, the soul seed it had left in the North Underworld Mountain would be awakened immediately. It would heal its wounds and recover its strength quickly. Soon it would be reborn again. This was equivalent to Zhou Xian having an extra life. It was precisely because of this that Zhou Xian was fearless. As long as Ji Tianxing dared to kill it, it could come back to life. Furthermore, the ancestor demonic god would also obtain a portion of his cultivation, allowing his power to rapidly increase. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing was a little hesitant. His face was gloomy as he pondered. To kill or not to kill, this was a problem. Zhou Xian crawled up from the ground and silently circulated his power to suppress his injuries. He looked up at Ji Tianxing and sneered, "Ji Tianxing, I believe you are very clear about the effects and power of the heavenly devil jade seed technique. Killing them all will not do you any good. If you are smart enough, you will know what to do." Zhou Xian's tone revealed that he had a card up his sleeve. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and stared at him coldly. He shouted in a low voice, "Zhou Xian, it is too early for you to be happy. Even if you have practiced the heavenly devil jade seed technique, I will still kill you. Not only you, I will also kill all the devil saints and cut off the ancestor demonic god's wings before killing it." After saying this, Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed down with all his strength. Heaven-splitting sword. Vast and mighty mana gushed out from the sword of burial of heaven and formed a giant golden sword 100 feet long. The golden sword fell from the sky. Zhou Xian was unable to dodge and was immediately drowned by the golden light. Kaboom! A thunderous explosion resounded through the sky. The wasteland within a radius of dozens of miles was shaken by the giant sword's bombardment. A huge gully was cut in the ground and countless cracks appeared in the surroundings. Endless dust and gravel floated in the air, covering the sky and the sun. Zhou Xian's body was cut in half by the sword light on the spot. It shattered into countless pieces and scattered among the ruins. A dark purple ball of light flew out from the pieces of flesh. That was Zhou Xian's soul, which had already been severely injured. Bang! The dark purple ball of light exploded and turned into a sky full of purple flames, illuminating the wasteland. The dazzling purple soul fire only lasted for a few breaths before it quickly dissipated. The wasteland gradually regained its tranquility and the dust in the sky slowly settled down. Everything was over. Zhou Xian had been killed by Ji Tianxing, but he was not truly dead. The ancestor demon god would obtain part of his cultivation and the spiritual seed that he had left in North Underworld Mountain would be reborn soon. Ji Tianxing knew that this would be the result, but he did not regret it. At least Zhou Xian's spiritual seed would not be reborn in a short period of time. In the next 10 years, it would not be able to recover to the martial sage realm and would not be able to cause trouble again. When the wasteland regained its tranquility, Ji Tianxing's figure appeared. He flew back to the middle of the wasteland and landed on the Golden Crow ancient tomb. Staring at the ancient tomb beneath his feet, he muttered to himself. Back then, Yang Tian obtained half of the sun-devouring divine skill from the ancient tomb and devoured the power of millions of sea beasts. It's a pity that he only obtained half of the divine skill. If he had cultivated the complete divine skill, he might have successfully broken through to the martial god realm. The other half of the divine skill is most likely still in this ancient tomb. Previously, he had sensed that there was a powerful divine power in the depths of the ancient tomb that seemed to be protecting and sealing something. He guessed that the other half of the sun-devouring divine skill was most likely hidden in that divine power. However, his strength was not enough to break through that divine power. He could only wait until he was strong enough to explore the mysteries of the ancient tomb. Then he activated the array in the ancient tomb and opened the passage to the next level. Zhoosh! With a flash of light, he left the third level and entered the fourth level of the divine pagoda. Around him was the vast divine sea. The surface of the sea was blue, calm and still. Tianxing flew across the surface of the sea at lightning speed and rushed to the eye of the sea in the depths of the divine sea. Half a day later, he passed through the eye of the sea and returned to the fifth level of the divine pagoda. The spacious and bright hall was as calm and cold as ever. On the large altar, 18 demon god statues stood quietly, surrounding the origin divine array. Tianxing flew to the top of the altar and sat in the middle of the origin divine array. He began to cultivate. The continuous battles had caused him serious injuries and consumed a lot of his magic power. He had to rest for an entire day to recover to his peak condition. Chapter 1998. Tianxing had used the divine blood control spirit art to establish a connection with the origin divine formation. He could communicate with the divine formation and use the origin divine gate to enter the first 4 floors of the divine pagoda. But he had yet to fully grasp the origin divine formation, so he couldn't control the target and accurately enter a floor. Thus, he continued to communicate with the origin divine formation and focused on unraveling its secrets. The hall was quiet as time quietly passed. 5 days passed without him noticing. Tianxing gradually used the divine blood control spirit art to strengthen his connection with the origin divine formation. At the same time, his control over the origin divine formation had also improved to a more precise level. He had already accurately found the path to the first 4 floors from the many passages of the origin divine gate. As long as he activated the formation, he could accurately reach the first 4 floors of the divine pagoda. This was already an enormous improvement, but he still felt that he was missing something. There were even deeper secrets within the origin divine formation that were waiting for him to unearth. Thus, he continued to probe the secrets of the origin divine formation. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, another 10 days passed. Tianxing's spiritual sense had already entered the depths of the origin divine formation and probed the secrets of the core region of the formation. To his surprise, he discovered a ball of divine golden light in the depths of the formation. Within this golden light was a golden pagoda the size of a fist. This small golden pagoda was extremely intricate and lifelike, so exquisite that it was breathtaking. Upon closer inspection, Tianxing discovered that this small pagoda was identical to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda, without the slightest difference. This discovery jolted him to his senses and filled him with anticipation. Just like the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda, this exquisite small pagoda is hidden in the depths of the origin divine formation. Could this small pagoda be the core that controls the divine pagoda, the key to opening the divine pagoda? As this thought flashed through Tianxing's mind, he impatiently sent out his spiritual sense to communicate with the small pagoda. The small golden pagoda was divine and dignified, exuding boundless divine might. Tianxing's spiritual sense found it difficult to approach, and only after many attempts did he manage to make contact with it. He was not in a hurry and patiently communicated with small pagoda, using his divine sense to nurture it. Half a month later, Small Tower finally accepted his divine sense and allowed him to enter. The first step of refining the small pagoda was a success. Tianxing was in high spirits. He continued to control his divine sense and focused on refining the small tower. He was immersed in casting the spell and completely forgot about the passage of time. Soon another month had passed. He had finally succeeded in refining the golden pagoda. Buzz! His divine sense fused with small pagoda, and small pagoda immediately released an even more resplendent golden light. The next moment, the small golden pagoda flew out from the depths of the formation under the guidance of his divine sense. Shwa! The golden pagoda flew out of the origin divine formation and landed in his palm. He looked down and saw a small golden pagoda that was 3 inches tall floating above his palm, flashing with a brilliant golden light. A sacred and mighty aura was released from the small pagoda. Tianxing loved it so much that he couldn't put it down. He held the small golden pagoda and observed it for a long time before putting it away. Small pagoda drilled into his palm, entered his head and finally landed in his sea of consciousness. In his sea of consciousness, A blazing white heaven-mending orb floated above. It was like a full moon, sacred and dignified. The small golden pagoda floated below the heaven-mending orb, quietly sleeping. The two coexisted peacefully without any conflict. They could both provide Ji Tianqing with powerful strength. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was relieved. He circulated his energy for 2 days and recovered to his peak state. Then he prepared to leave the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Thus he took out the small golden pagoda and used his divine sense to communicate with it. Shua. Small pagoda released a resplendent golden light that condensed into a door of light in front of him. He stepped into the door of light and immediately disappeared. The next moment he appeared on the summit of a 2,000-foot-tall mountain. It was late at night. In the gloomy night sky, a crescent moon was hanging and there were sparse stars. Beneath his feet was a ruined ground and around him was a messy forest. A cold wind blew across the mountain peak, sweeping up the sand on the ground. Ji Tianqing looked around and realized that he had left the Yin-Yang secret realm. The mountain peak beneath his feet was the entrance to the Yin-Yang secret realm. There was originally a golden and blue door of light on the mountain peak, which was protected by a large array set up by the Broken Sky Alliance. But now the dual-colored door of light and the defensive array were long gone. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense and scanned the surrounding 500 miles. However, it was quiet within 500 miles, and there was no aura of martial artists. Strange. When I came here before, there were more than 20 martial artists gathered here. It's only been 2 months, why is everyone gone? Ji Tianqing murmured to himself, feeling a little puzzled. However, he guessed the reason after thinking for a while. The Broken Sky Alliance occupied the entrance to the secret realm, and the other forces were not qualified to fight for it. Later, Ji Shiluo and the demon race experts arrived and killed all the Broken Sky Alliance's experts, intimidating the other forces' experts. Those experts could have fantasies about the Heaven-Shattering Alliance because the Heaven-Shattering Alliance was a human force, so they still had some feelings in humanity. However, the demon race of the North Underworld Mountain was scarier than any other race. Who dared to fantasize about the demon race unless they were tired of living? In addition, the door of light at the entrance to the secret realm had disappeared. Even if the other forces had the guts to fight with the Broken Sky Alliance and the demon race, they would not be able to enter the secret realm. Just as Ji Tianqing was thinking, a purple light flew from the night sky and landed in his hand. Whoosh! After the purple light disappeared, it was a communication jade slip the size of a finger. Ji Tianqing immediately knew that it was a message from Jiku. Thus he released his divine sense and read the message in the jade slip. Jiku's clear and melodious voice immediately sounded in his mind. Big brother Tianqing, we have been hiding nearby for 2 months and Ji Shiluo has not returned. Did you fight with Ji Shiluo in the secret realm? Are you injured? Is Ji Shiluo still alive? If Ji Shiluo is dead, hurry over here as soon as possible. I am near the 2 Divergent Mountain and there are more than 30 demon elites here. You can catch them all in one fell swoop. The message in the jade slip was not much, but it was very important. After Ji Tianqing heard it, he frowned and pondered for a moment before sending a message back to Jiku. Kuku, Ji Shiluo and the demon race experts under him were all killed by me. However, the ancestral fiend god taught Ji Shiluo a secret technique called the Great Heavenly Demon Seed Jade Technique, which can bring him back to life. Ji Shiluo left a soul seed in the North Underworld Mountain, and he should be able to return to his peak in 10 years. As for the 2 Divergent Mountain, I will not go there. I can't kill those 30 or so demon clan elites, so I can only spare their lives. Chapter 1999. After sending a message to Jiku, Ji Tianqing waited for half an hour. Then Jiku sent him a message. When Jiku learned that Ji Shiluo had been killed and all the demon experts had died, he was very excited. As for the demon elites of Dual Qi Mountain, they could only count themselves lucky and manage to keep their lives. She was going to follow the demon elites back to the North Underworld Mountain. She would only contact Ji Tianqing if there was any situation or major event in the future. After Ji Tianqing finished reading the message in the jade slip, he silently put it away and didn't reply to the message. He sighed with mixed feelings and turned around to leave. He flew across the sky like a shooting star and headed south. The matter of the Jutian 10 Absolutes Pagoda had come to an end. When he was strong enough, he would come back to explore the secrets of the Divine Pagoda. After all, he had the secret key to the Divine Pagoda and could enter and exit the Divine Pagoda at any time. Other than him, No one else could enter the divine pagoda, not even martial saints. After all, the entrance to the Yin-Yang realm had disappeared. Ji Tianxing crossed the fallen blood lake and was flying over the mountains. Early in the morning, the sun had just risen. When he was flying over a vast mountain range, he suddenly stopped. Swoosh! He landed on the peak of a 1,000-foot-tall mountain and stood on a millstone-sized rock on the mountain peak. Damn it, I actually forgot about this. He looked up at the sky and muttered with a strange expression. In the originally clear sky, there was suddenly a gust of wind. Endless gray clouds gathered from all directions and gathered in the sky above the mountain. In just 100 breaths of time, the gray clouds turned into pitch-black tribulation clouds. They rolled rapidly and were about to condense into a vortex. The world was dark and the air was filled with an extremely oppressive aura. Within 100 miles, all the birds and beasts living in the forest were scared out of their wits and fled into the distance. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing's heavenly tribulation was about to descend. He looked up at the tribulation clouds with a calm expression and said in a playful tone, "I've long reached the 8th stage of the tribulation transcendence realm. Previously, I stayed in the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda and never sensed the heavenly tribulation." Now that he had just left the divine pagoda, less than 24 hours later, the heavenly tribulation arrived as promised. It seems that I can't avoid even one of the heavenly tribulations that I have to face. The burial of heaven's voice rang out in his mind. Its tone was solemn as it said, "As long as it is a world covered by the heavenly Tao, no matter where it is in the universe, it must follow the heavenly Tao's rules. The facts have proven that your guess was correct. The 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda can indeed cut off the will of the heavenly Tao and isolate the senses of the heavenly tribulation." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Only a top king-grade divine artifact can achieve such an effect. It's just like the backup plan I left behind all those years ago. Only by exhausting all my divine power and might could I disrupt the heavenly secrets and leave behind memories of my soul during the heavenly tribulation." Just as he was discussing with the burial of heaven, the vortex of tribulation clouds high in the sky had already formed. In the pitch-black vortex of tribulation clouds, there were colorful lightning arcs flashing, releasing a terrifying heavenly Tao's pressure that enveloped an area of 100 miles. Ji Tianxing endured the heavenly Tao's pressure, but he could still maintain his calm and his body was still upright. Not long after, the heavenly tribulation arrived. Boom. Following the deafening sound of thunder, 6 lightning bolts struck down from the vortex of tribulation clouds. 6 lightning pillars that were hundreds of feet long, carrying a divine power that could destroy everything, fell from the sky and struck down at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was fearless. With his left hand behind his back, he waved his right hand and struck out with a golden light that filled the sky, forming a huge vortex. The vortex that was thousands of feet in radius blocked above his head, releasing an incomparably powerful suction force. Bam bam bam. A series of muffled sounds burst out. The 6 lightning bolts blasted into the vortex and were quickly swallowed up. The first lightning bolt was easily neutralized by Ji Tianxing just like that. Next, the second lightning bolt came one after another. This time, 12 lightning pillars blasted down from the vortex of tribulation clouds. The power was more than 3 times stronger than before. Boom 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 boom. Another earth-shattering sound burst out, resounding through the universe. Ji Tianxing struck out with a golden light again, forming a vortex and swallowing the 12 lightning bolts. The third lightning bolt had reached 24 bolts, and its power was even more terrifying. However, the result was still the same. Ji Tianxing still swallowed all the lightning bolts. After the third lightning bolt, the vortex of tribulation clouds changed. Not long after, the vortex of tribulation clouds changed, and even more powerful lightning bolts descended. When the fourth lightning bolt descended, a total of 48 5-colored lightning pillars were arranged into a divine formation of heaven and earth, ruthlessly bombarding Ji Tianxing. Each lightning pillar contained the power of 5 types of divine lightning, and its power was immeasurable. The 48 lightning pillars were arranged in a divine formation, containing supreme divine power that could destroy heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing calmly dealt with it. Holding the sword of burial of heaven, he instantly stabbed out 49 sword lights to meet the lightning bolts in the sky. Bang 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 bang. A series of loud noises like firecrackers resounded through the clouds. The 48 lightning pillars were all destroyed by the sword lights, turning into billions of lightning arcs that scattered between heaven and earth. Ji Tianxing was not injured at all. The 1,000-foot-tall mountain under his feet and the surrounding mountains were smashed into pieces by the lightning bolts, collapsing into charred ruins. The violent shock waves wreaked havoc, blowing up sand and dust that filled the sky for hundreds of miles. The fifth and sixth lightning bolts that followed doubled in number, reaching 96 and 192 bolts, and their power was also extremely terrifying. This was definitely an unprecedented heavenly tribulation. If it was any other expert that witnessed this scene with their own eyes, they would be shocked to the point of being absent-minded and terrified to the extreme. Even a martial sage expert would not dare to withstand such a terrifying heavenly tribulation, and be killed by 192 bolts of lightning. The only outcome would be death and disintegration. However, Ji Tianxing did it, continuously creating miracles. With his strong body and marvelous sword techniques, he destroyed the lightning bolts that filled the sky and blocked the power of the lightning bolts. After the sixth lightning bolt, the tribulation cloud vortex changed again, turning into a blood-red color. The seventh lightning bolt was still the inner demon tribulation. Ji Tianxing looked up at the sky, watching the blood-red lightning bolt from the dark red tribulation cloud. He did not dodge, calmly accepting the attack of the blood-red lightning bolt. Soon he was enveloped by a huge ball of blood-red light, entering the illusion of the inner demon tribulation. He had already gone through several inner demon tribulations and had sufficient experience. Although the inner demon tribulation this time was as dangerous as before, he successfully resolved it. As for the eighth tribulation of wind and fire, it was not a problem for him. The heavenly wind fire and the mysterious black fire that burned his body were also used by him to temper his body. Finally, the last lightning bolt descended. A very strange lightning bolt struck down from the tribulation cloud vortex that was hundreds of miles wide. Chapter 2000. Ji Tianxing was knowledgeable. He had seen gold, purple, blue, red, and black lightning. Only the white lightning was something he had never seen before. However, the lightning pillar contained both black and white, which immediately made him understand. The power of yin and yang. This is the yin-yang tribulation. As expected, the lightning pillar that was hundreds of meters long immediately turned into a ball of black and white light after hitting Ji Tianxing. The black and white light within a radius of 5 kilometers turned into a huge disk that drowned Ji Tianxing's figure. The appearance of this disk was rather mysterious and contained the profundity of the Great Tao. The disk was half black and half white, and it was formed by a black and white yin-yang fish with their heads and tails intertwined. It was the Taiji diagram that represented yin and yang. Ji Tianxing was in the black and white formation. He had already entered another space and was undergoing a test. This was an alternate space with a radius of 50 kilometers. It was filled with black and white and it looked extremely simple. However, there was no spiritual energy in the entire space, only the endless power of yin and yang. Ji Tianxing stood in midair and endured a powerful suppressive force. The power of yin and yang formed invisible blades that constantly strangled him. The attribute of the power was unpredictable. Sometimes it was as hot as the sun and sometimes it was as cold as ice. No matter how strong his physical defense was, he had to resist with all his strength to protect himself. In the blink of an eye, an hour passed. Ji Tianxing stood in the black and white torrent, circulating his energy to resist the impact of the power of yin and yang. He had no time to care about anything else. He had consumed a lot of his magic power and his mind was somewhat tired. However, the black and white torrent was endless and never stopped. His power did not weaken at all. Ji Tianxing knew that he could not continue like this. When his power was exhausted, the power of yin and yang would multiply endlessly. If he did not find a way to resolve this yin-yang tribulation and leave this black and white space, he would definitely be trapped here until he died. Therefore, he flew forward with all his might, trying to find the end of the black and white space. However, he soon discovered that after passing through the black light area, he would enter the white light area. After passing through the white light area, he would enter the black light area. Even if he flew for tens of thousands of miles, he still couldn't find the end. It seems that only by grasping the power of yin and yang can I leave this space and resolve this calamity. Ji Tianxing murmured in a low voice. Then he sat cross-legged in the black and white space and began to cast a spell. He did not release his magic power to form a shield to protect himself. His entire body was dim and his expression was calm as usual. It was as if he was calmly enduring the power of yin and yang. More than 1,000 years ago, when he had broken through to the martial sage realm, he had already seen through yin and yang and mastered the power of yin and yang. He had a deep understanding of the Tao of yin and yang. What is yin and yang? The sun was yang and the moon was yin. The male is yang while the female is yin. Life is yang, death is yin, right is yang, reverse is yin, fire is yang, water is yin. There were too many things like this to count. In short, everything in the world has two sides, good and evil, good and bad, positive and negative. As the saying goes, when things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. Yin and yang generally referred to two opposing but interrelated forces. The two complemented each other, promoting and restraining each other, but they could reach a level of endless growth. This was similar to the generation and restraint of the five elements. Of course, the Tao of yin and yang was called the Tao. First, there was the Tao of yin and yang, then there was the Tao of the five elements. Ji Tianxing's understanding of the world's origin and the universe had reached an extremely deep level. He quickly entered a state of cultivation and immersed himself in the power of yin and yang. His entire body was wrapped in black and white brilliance. If the black and white brilliance was a torrent, then he was a fish swimming freely in the torrent, unrestrained and free. He understood the principles of yin and yang and mastered the Tao of yin and yang. How could the black and white brilliance hurt him? Time passed silently. Ji Tianxing was immersed in cultivation. After 3 days he had completely mastered the Tao of yin and yang and could control the mysterious power of yin and yang. Then he began to resolve the yin-yang tribulation. He stood in the black and white torrent and stretched out his left and right palms. He made a mysterious hand seal and formed a series of hand seals. Suddenly the black and white brilliance around him separated. The black and white separated and became distinct, gradually forming a special pattern. The process was very slow, but Ji Tianxing was very patient, as if he did not know fatigue. An entire day passed. In the space within 100 miles, the black and white brilliance had completely separated. A Tai Chi diagram formed by the yin-yang fish was finally formed. This undoubtedly meant that Ji Tianxing had truly mastered the Tao of yin and yang. Swoosh. After the yin-yang diagram was formed, it immediately spun faster. Then the diagram quickly shrank and turned into a black and white pillar of light that surged into Ji Tianxing's body. That was the majestic power of yin and yang. It was all injected into his body to increase his strength. Ji Tianxing closed his eyes and calmly accepted the gift of the heavenly Tao. This was his reward for resolving the yin-yang tribulation. After 2 hours, the endless power of yin and yang was completely devoured by him. Swoosh. A light flashed before his eyes and he returned to the sky. Beneath his feet was a ruin with a radius of 100 miles, surrounded by vast mountains. Above his head was the huge tribulation cloud vortex, and it was still gradually dissipating. Ji Tianxing had finally transcended the sixth tribulation. After the tribulation cloud vortex dissipated, it turned into a wisp of sacred golden light and surged into Ji Tianxing's body. This was the reward bestowed by the heavenly Tao after successfully transcending the tribulation. Ji Tianxing bathed in the sacred golden light, and his soul and body were baptized and strengthened. His strength was also rapidly increasing. After transcending this tribulation, his strength had increased by 4 times, and his combat strength was even more powerful. Fortunately, this is the ruins of God, and there's no one within a radius of tens of thousands of miles. No one should have seen me transcending the tribulation here, right? Ji Tianxing looked around and saw that there was nothing unusual around him, so he turned around and flew away. He continued to fly south, preparing to return to Heavenly Pillar Mountain. However, something that made him very embarrassed happened. He had just transcended the sixth tribulation when he sensed something in his mind again. The will of the heavenly Tao descended. His 7th tribulation would descend this evening. Ji Tianxing did not know whether to laugh or cry at this result. I've just transcended the tribulation and it's coming again? Transcending the tribulation twice in a row? Is there such a thing in this world? I should have transcended the 3rd tribulation, but the heavenly Tao's detection was blocked by the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower. Now that I've left the tower, the tribulation is coming all at once. If it were anyone else, they would definitely die and turn into ashes under the tribulation. He muttered in his heart, but he was not worried and continued to travel high in the sky. A few hours later it was evening. At this moment Ji Tianxing was speeding high in the sky, flying over a vast mountain range. Sensing that the tribulation was coming, he hurriedly stopped above a large lake and prepared to transcend the tribulation. Chapter 2001. This lake was located in the middle of the mountains and had a radius of about 100 miles. The lake water was clear and sparkling. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the surface of the lake, giving it a faint golden-red color. However, as the tribulation clouds formed, the sky became dark. The light of the setting sun was also covered. Strong winds blew on the surface of the lake and huge waves surged. A terrifying heavenly aura came down and enveloped the entire lake, killing a large number of fish, prawns, and crabs in the lake. The demonic beasts living in the lake were all scared out of their wits. They rushed out of the lake and fled in all directions. Xianxia stood calmly above the lake. He looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky and silently adjusted his breathing. Soon the first heavenly lightning struck from the tribulation cloud vortex. Kaboom! 7 lightning pillars of different colors came down fiercely with unparalleled heavenly aura. Xianxia waved his hand calmly and struck out a bright golden light. It formed a huge vortex and blasted toward the 7 lightning pillars. Bam 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 bam. The 7 lightning pillars were blocked by the vortex and were devoured by Xianxia in the blink of an eye. Then the second and third heavenly lightning bolts came one after another. 14 and 28 lightning pillars came down from the tribulation cloud vortex. Xianxia used the same trick again. He used the golden vortex to block the lightning bolts and devoured them. After the third heavenly lightning, the tribulation cloud vortex began to change. When the fourth heavenly lightning struck, the number of lightning bolts had reached 56. Each bolt of lightning contained 5 different colors, and its power was several times more violent than before. Moreover, the arrangement and order of the lightning bolts also contained heavenly secrets. It was in line with the mysteries of the heaven and earth divine array. Boom 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 boom. An earth-shattering sound exploded in the sky and shook the universe. Xianxia took out the sword of burial of heaven and stabbed out dozens of sword lights to meet the lightning bolts in the sky. With a loud bang, all the sword lights and lightning bolts collapsed into billions of pieces and scattered between heaven and earth. The shockwave formed by the 5-colored light carried the power to destroy everything and hit the lake in the mountains. The water in the lake evaporated and the surrounding mountains collapsed one after another, splashing dust into the sky. Xianxia was in the middle of the chaotic turbulence, unscathed and untainted by even a speck of dust. The 5th and 6th heavenly thunders descended one after another. The number of heavenly thunders kept doubling, and the power of the heavenly thunders also multiplied. Boom! The sound of thunder resounded through the sky, and the divine might suppressed everything. The heaven and earth within a radius of a few hundred miles became chaotic. The dried-up lake turned into ruins and the surrounding mountains turned into dust. Only Xianxia remained unscathed. He stood calmly in the sky, calmly welcoming the baptism of lightning. No matter how violent the lightning was, it couldn't hurt him. Half an hour later, the 6 bolts of heavenly thunder ended. The tribulation cloud vortex began to change and was dyed with a dark red color. A blood-red pillar of lightning descended from the sky and immediately enveloped him. Once again he was enveloped by the blood-red light and fell into the illusion of the inner demon tribulation. In the illusory realm he went through all kinds of trials and tortures and saw all kinds of illusions. But with his strong willpower he successfully resolved the inner demon tribulation. Moreover, he awakened many memories of his divine soul and gained a lot. After the inner demon tribulation ended, the great tribulation of wind and fire arrived as scheduled. The heavenly wind, astral fire, and the mysterious black fire burned his body and divine soul. But with the help of the great tribulation of wind and fire he continued to refine his body and divine soul, and his strength continued to increase. An hour later the great tribulation of wind and fire also ended. Finally the 9th tribulation descended. Boom! A bright silver pillar of light brazenly shot down from the tribulation cloud vortex. The 1,000-meter-long silver pillar of light glowed with a cold silver light as bright as the moon. Xianxia immediately raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared on his lips. The power of stars. Could it be that the test of this tribulation has something to do with stars? When this thought flashed through his mind, the silver pillar of light had already hit him. The surging silver light formed a light ball with a radius of 15 miles and enveloped him. This silver ball of light hung in the sky like a bright full moon. Xianxia was trapped in another space, enduring the test of the star tribulation. At this moment he was in a vast and boundless starry sky. Under his feet was a dark and cold void, and in the vast starry sky around him, countless cold stars were scattered, shining brightly. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry. He calmly looked around and speculated about the test of the star tribulation. In the starry sky there are only many stars except for me. The stars seem very close, but in fact they are millions of miles away. It is reasonable to say that martial artists in the crossing calamity realm cannot move in the void, let alone absorb the power of stars. Except for me, there is basically no martial artist in the crossing calamity realm who can pass this tribulation. It seems that the way of heaven's test for me is becoming more and more harsh. Ji Tianqing thought silently, and his sharp eyes observed the surroundings. After a while he found a clue. Thousands of miles behind him there was a small silver light ball. He observed for a long time before he could barely see that the silver light ball seemed to be a door. However, the door formed by the silver light was floating alone in the void. Could that door be the key to leaving the void and resolving the star tribulation? This thought flashed through his mind, and he flew toward the light door with all his might. In just half an hour he had flown thousands of miles away. It was reasonable to say that he should have arrived near the starry light door. But in fact he was still thousands of miles away from the starry light door. It was equivalent to him walking on the spot, and he did not get any closer. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and fell into deep thought. There is indeed another mystery. I knew that the way of heaven's test was not that simple. Since he could not get close to the starry light door, he had to think of another way. Star attraction technique. Therefore, Ji Tianqing began to use the star attraction technique to absorb the power of stars in the starry sky. As he formed the seal between his hands, the stars in all directions emitted a cold silver light. Strands of silver brilliance gathered from the surroundings like thin threads and surrounded him. However, Ji Tianqing did not swallow the power of stars into his body. He gathered the thousands of strands of silver light into a bright silver light and spread it in the void in front of him. As time passed, a small silver bridge formed by starlight appeared. 2 hours later the small silver bridge extended to 10,000 feet long. Ji Tianqing stepped on the small bridge and walked to the end. As expected, he was closer to the starry light door. It turned out that his method was correct. If he wanted to reach the starry light door, he could only use the power of stars to form a bridge. He was encouraged and excited. He used all his strength to use the way of heaven to control the power of stars. Before he knew it, 3 days had passed. Chapter 2002. Ji Tianqing had been casting spells continuously for several days and was quite tired. However, he didn't dare to stop and rest in case another change occurred in the void. With his strong willpower, he tenaciously held on and continued to cast spells continuously. After 12 days, the length of the bridge of stars had reached 10,000 miles. He finally arrived in front of the starlight door. This door, condensed from starlight, was 100 feet tall. It was completely silver and radiated a holy and cold aura. Behind the light door was darkness, and layers of spatial ripples could be clearly seen. Obviously, passing through this light door would lead him to leave the void and return to the place where Ji Tianqing was transcending the tribulation. He was exhausted to the extreme. His face was pale and his mind was weak and dispirited. However, his eyes revealed a deep sense of relief. He only wanted to pass through the light door as soon as possible. At this moment, a drastic change suddenly occurred in the quiet void. Thousands of stars all turned into dazzling meteors and flew toward Ji Tianqing. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In just 2 hours, more than 3,600 stars had gathered around Nie Tian. Every star turned into a surging silver light and drilled into his body. An incomparably vast and majestic star power immediately filled his body, causing him to swell and bloat. His originally empty magic power was immediately replenished. His originally weak and tired mind was quickly recovered. In fact, the star power was too vast. He couldn't even devour 1/10 of it. In order to not be blown up by the power of more than 3,000 stars, he could only pour the excess star power into the heaven-mending orb and the sword of burial of heaven. With the heaven-mending orb and the sword of burial of heaven helping him devour the star power, the pressure on him was greatly reduced and his body quickly returned to normal. After an entire day, all the star power was devoured by him, the heaven-mending orb and the sword of burial of heaven. Not only did he return to his peak state, but his strength had also increased by more than 3 times. Then he stepped through the starlight door and left the pitch-black void. Swoosh. In the next moment he returned to the sky and was still in the silver ball of light. Above his head was the tribulation cloud vortex, and below his feet was the ruined lake. Swoosh! The silver light quickly dissipated. The vortex of tribulation clouds high in the sky also quickly collapsed, and a ray of divine light descended. Ji Tianxing was bathed in the divine light. His body and soul were baptized and his strength soared again. The seventh heavenly tribulation was finally passed. Ji Tianxing's strength had already reached an extremely terrifying level. He did not stop and continued to fly south. Although Ji Tianxing knew that he had to go through 3 tribulations in a row. Moreover, his soul also sensed that he would have to undergo another tribulation tomorrow morning. However, he wasn't going to wait here. He had to continue on his way. As for the preparation work, there was nothing much to prepare. No matter what kind of heavenly tribulation it would only be a little difficult for him and would not endanger his safety. Unlike ordinary tribulation transcendence cultivators, they had to carefully prepare for a heavenly tribulation for decades. After transcending the tribulation, he would have to recuperate for at least a few more years. Ji Tianxing was a monstrous existence and couldn't be judged by common sense. The day passed quickly. The next morning he sensed that the heavenly tribulation was about to arrive. He landed in a vast and majestic mountain range. In the majestic mountain range, the morning fog shrouded and the dew was fresh. The sun rose from the east, sprinkling golden light that covered thousands of miles. There were many birds and beasts in the mountain range, happy and content. What a peaceful scene. However, the tranquility here was soon broken. A gust of wind blew in the sky, and endless gray clouds gathered to form a black cloud for hundreds of miles. Thunder and lightning flashed in the black cloud, and hurricanes whistled between heaven and earth. The invisible divine power of the heavenly Tao enveloped a radius of hundreds of miles, turning this area into a forbidden zone. The mountain forest was in chaos, and thousands of monsters were scrambling to escape. Those weak monsters that were frightened by the divine power could not escape the forbidden zone in time and could only turn into ashes under the heavenly tribulation. Boom! With a shocking thunder, 8 dazzling lightning beams tore through the dark sky and blasted toward Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was as calm as ever. He waved his hand and cast a spell to deal with the lightning attacks. The 8 colorful lightning beams were easily defeated and devoured by him. 16 lightning bolts and 32 lightning bolts followed one after another, but the results were the same. After 3 bolts of lightning, the tribulation cloud vortex changed and its power increased by several times. When the 4th bolt of lightning descended, there were as many as 64 lightning beams, arranged in a heaven and earth divine formation, and mixed with the power of 5 elements. The 5th and 6th bolts of lightning had 128 and 256 bolts of lightning. The densely packed lightning pillars almost filled up the sky within 100 miles, like a rain of arrows shooting down. In the face of such a destructive divine power, Ji Tianxing was not afraid. He waved the burial of heaven and used a supreme sword technique to defeat all the lightning bolts in the sky. The first 6 bolts of lightning were not difficult for him. Not only was it easy for him to resist the lightning attacks, but his movements were also smooth. Soon the tribulation cloud vortex turned blood red. The strange and unpredictable mental demon tribulation descended. Ji Tianxing was enveloped by the blood-red light and lost in the mental demon illusion for an hour. Only then did he defeat the mental demon illusion and successfully pass it. The 8th bolt of lightning descended, and the great tribulation of wind and fire arrived as expected. Ji Tianxing's physical body had been tempered to the extreme. Using the great tribulation of wind and fire to temper his Dharma body did not improve much. He simply used all the power of the great tribulation of wind and fire to temper his soul. This process was very slow and very painful. However, he had the wisdom of the former divine king and an unbelievably tenacious will. Of course, he succeeded in tempering his soul. The power of his soul was greatly enhanced. Kaboom! The last bolt of lightning descended. This was the ultimate test of this heavenly tribulation. In the tribulation cloud vortex, a very strange divine lightning struck down. That 10,000 feet long pillar of lightning was actually transparent and formless. It was almost invisible to the naked eye. Only the divine sense could see it clearly. This lightning did not seem to contain any elemental power, but it had an incomparably mysterious and strange power. Ji Tianxing did not pass this kind of heavenly tribulation in his previous life. He was simply baffled. Since ancient times, who has seen invisible divine lightning? Is this still considered divine lightning? When this thought flashed through his mind, the invisible divine lightning had already struck him. Bang! In the deafening loud sound, the invisible divine lightning turned into a ball of transparent brilliance and enveloped him. If one used their divine sense to investigate, they would find that this ball of transparent brilliance was like a water bubble. Ji Tianxing was trapped in the water bubble. His eyes were tightly closed and his soul was in a deep sleep. His soul consciousness had also entered an indescribable illusory realm. It was a dreamlike space. There were transparent light screens in all directions, flashing with hundreds of images. Every image was related to Ji Tianxing's previous life. For example, back then, Kenshin suppressed the demon emperor with a sword and saved millions of people in the Tianshan region. Chapter 2003. In the dreamlike space, the surroundings were sealed by invisible divine power. This was formless and unfathomable. Those dazzling scenes were all things that had happened in the past, and they were directly or indirectly related to Ji Tianxing. For example, back then he established a dojo at Tianzhu Mountain and challenged all the martial saints in the world. There had once been a famous martial saint expert who had climbed the mountain with great confidence to challenge the martial saint. In the end, he was defeated by Kenshin after 1 or 2 moves. His reputation was ruined and he was even seriously injured. Since then, that martial saint's reputation plummeted, and the power of his sect also declined day by day, becoming weaker and weaker. A few hundred years later, this martial saint had passed away, and the sect that he had personally founded had also fallen apart, vanishing into thin air. His descendants remembered this grudge and saw Kenshin and Tianzhu Mountain as mortal enemies. Kenshin had already ascended to the upper realm and there was no news of him. However, Tianzhu Mountain still existed. Therefore, that martial saint's descendants and disciples took revenge openly and secretly, and they crazily attacked Tianzhu Mountain. Another example was that when Kenshin was in charge of Tianzhu Mountain, he had taken in many talented martial artists. Among them, there was a person who carried a deep grudge and climbed Tianzhu Mountain alone, and he became a disciple of Tianzhu Mountain. However, this person did not do proper work, and he carried a set of jade chess all day long, looking for people to play chess with, and he disturbed other disciples who were practicing their swordsmanship. Later, the Huanglong Daoist wanted to expel this person from the sect. This person knelt in the rainy night for an entire night, begging the Huanglong Daoist to let him stay. Kenshin was moved by compassion and he personally guided this person. After a few hundred years, this person mastered his divine power and finally became a chess saint. Moreover, this person created a huge organization with tens of millions of disciples, and he saved countless ambitious people. Then the scene of the bright moon demon emperor following Kenshin appeared in the scene. She chased after Kenshin's footsteps all her life, and she loved him to the extreme, but she did not have a good ending and finally died in the starry sky. 1,000 years later, she was reincarnated as the princess of the demon imperial court, but she was stranded in a human kingdom, and she followed Ji Tianxing since she was young. Even after reincarnation, she was still infatuated. Ji Tianxing did not know how long he had been in formless. After seeing thousands of scenes and images, he suddenly had an epiphany. Cause of the past, effect of the present. This heavenly tribulation is most likely a karmic tribulation. Understanding this point, his expression was rather solemn as he frowned and fell into deep thought. The chaos was divided into yin and yang, and then there was light and darkness. The power of the 5 elements gave birth to all things. Whether it was the spiritual energy of heaven and earth cultivated by martial artists or the power of stars cultivated by gods, they were all traceable and real. The concept of karma and blessings was illusory and unfathomable. I never expected that the heavenly Tao would actually use this as a tribulation and set up such a test for me. When he was in the upper realm, he had come into contact with the myriad races in the universe and understood the 3,000 great Daos and the myriad races theories. Among them, there were several powerful races and martial arts schools that believed in karma. They used their great divine powers to gain insight into their past lives, present lives and future lives. They focused on doing good deeds and accumulating blessings, all for the sake of achieving positive results. Ji Tianxing had some understanding of this, but he had never studied it in depth. However, he never expected that the 8th heavenly tribulation from the heavenly Tao would use this as a foundation. This was simply not giving him a way out. In my past life, I also went through 9 tribulations, but they were all traceable heavenly tribulations related to the 5 elements, wind and thunder. I never thought that the few heavenly tribulations I've gone through in this life would be rarer each time. Especially the reincarnation and karmic tribulations, these are not tribulations that a person should go through. Even the gods of the upper realm may not be able to resolve this kind of power. Ji Tianxing pondered with a solemn expression and sighed faintly. The heavenly Tao is ruthless, fair and strict. It's most likely that I messed with the heavenly Tao in my past life and left a backup plan in the heavenly tribulation, causing the tribulation in this life to be so bumpy. However, since things have come to this, it's useless to talk about it. I can only try to resolve it. Thus, he began to try to resolve this karmic tribulation. After an entire day, he finally figured it out. A total of 108,000 images and scenes floated and flickered in the formless. Many of the images and scenes were his experiences in his past life and present life, and they were all directly or indirectly related. He tried to use his mind to manipulate a few images and piece them together. There was a direct connection between those images, which clearly showed the process of a certain incident and the final result. As a result, after those images were pieced together, they immediately dissipated. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing was stunned for a moment, and then he came to a realization. I see. He vaguely found a way to resolve the karmic tribulation, and immediately became spirited as he began to piece together the various images in the formless. Time passed silently. One image after another, under the guidance of his mind, quickly pieced together and disappeared. Half a month passed by quickly. More than 90% of the 108,000 images and scenes had disappeared, leaving only slightly more than 8,000 images. In this half a month, in the process of piecing together the images, Ji Tianxing also made up for countless memories. The things that he had experienced in his past life and present life, whether good or evil, right or wrong, he recalled about 90% of them. Only then did he realize that many things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. It was a simple matter, but the consequences and chain reactions were beyond his imagination. However, as the images continued to decrease, the speed at which he pieced together the images also became slower and slower. Until now he seemed to be in a deadlock and his progress was extremely slow. After all, the remaining 8,000 images were all somewhat unfamiliar and messy. He observed and pondered for a long time, but he could not see any necessary connection between these images. He could not rashly try to piece them together, otherwise he would definitely make a mistake, and when that time came it might lead to unpredictable consequences. Therefore he sat in the formless, calmed his mind and carefully observed the images around him. He fell into deep thought, trying to analyze the scenes in each image and the possible consequences and effects. This process was very long and it was mentally and physically exhausting. Another half a month passed. His sea of consciousness had been immersed in thinking, and his thoughts were constantly diverging and deducing, never stopping. Out of the 8,000 plus images, another 3,000 plus images disappeared. He gained even more insights and insights. He finally understood that only by not being bound by the 7 emotions and 6 desires could he remove the fog and see the essence of things. As a god, looking down on all living beings with cold eyes without being tainted by karma, he could live forever. His mind and emotions had reached an extremely calm and ethereal state. In this way he could see the karmic connection between those images. After a full 3 months, all the images in the formless were pieced together by him and they all disappeared. This mysterious, strange, and difficult karmic tribulation was resolved by him. Swoosh. Chapter 2004. It was dusk. The light between heaven and earth was dim, and the surrounding forest was deathly silent. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky above the ruins as his clothes and hair danced in the wind. He looked calm and emotionless. He looked up at the calamity cloud vortex above his head and his eyes were calm and wise. His aura was also restrained to the extreme, as if he was an ordinary person who did not have any ripples. However, his current state made him seem like an aloof and remote god that looked down on all living things. No one in this world could understand what kind of state it was. It was not a martial arts state but the divine path realm. It was a state that originated from one's soul. Swoosh. The calamity cloud vortex in the sky quickly dissipated and turned into a ray of sacred golden light that descended from the sky. Ji Tianxing bathed in the golden light and his physical body and spiritual soul were baptized and strengthened rapidly. After 15 minutes, the sacred golden light gradually disappeared. His strength had also increased by several times and reached an unimaginable level. Phew. In such a short period of time, I have gone through 3 heavenly tribulations. It is so tiring and exhausting. President Ji Tian let out a sigh of relief, revealing a look of relief. Even someone as powerful as him felt exhausted after going through 3 heavenly tribulations. However, this was the will of heaven and even a divine being could not resist it. Unless he hid in the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower, he would not be tested by the heavenly tribulations. However, he could not hide in the God Tower forever. If he did not go through the 9 heavenly tribulations, he would never reach the martial sage realm. Ji Tianxing glanced at the mountains around him and realized that he had indeed wasted 3 months of his time trying to overcome the tribulation. I have left the Pillar of Heaven's mountain for more than half a year. I wonder how the situation is on the mountain. He muttered in a low voice and prepared to turn around and leave. However, at this moment, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky behind him. Swoosh! Dazzling golden light surged out of the crack, illuminating the heaven and earth within 100 miles. The golden light condensed into a huge palm that covered the sky and slammed down with a suppressive force. Before the huge palm arrived, the terrifying suppressive force had already enveloped Ji Tianxing. He felt as if he was stuck in a quagmire, unable to move an inch. His skin and nerves were stretched taut. It's a martial saint expert. He immediately realized that a martial sage had made a move. The power of that golden palm was enough to threaten his life. At this critical moment, he unhesitatingly took out the sword of Burial of Heaven and fiercely stabbed at the giant golden palm. The Burial of Heaven sword burst forth with a golden light that soared into the sky, condensing into a giant sword that was 1,000 feet long. The sword and the palm collided and an earth-shattering bang burst out. At that moment, a thunderous boom shook the heavens and spread for hundreds of kilometers. The giant golden sword collapsed on the spot, shattering into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. A large hole was also pierced through the giant palm, but its power did not diminish as it slammed into Ji Tianxing. Boom! Ji Tianxing was sent flying away by the gigantic golden palm. His face turned deathly pale as he was sent flying tens of miles away, smashing into a pile of ruins. The 1,000-foot-tall pile of ruins suddenly exploded into pieces, raising a cloud of dust. After a long time, the dust and golden light dissipated. Ji Tianxing flew back into the sky. He did not have time to tidy up his messy hair and clothes. Holding the sword of Burial of Heaven, he looked toward the north. He saw a purple-robed figure slowly walking out of the darkness. It was a man in a purple robe with a head full of white hair. He was thin and tall and his eyes were as sharp as swords. However, he was wearing a mask made of purple jade that covered his entire face. Other than his eyes, one could not see his face at all. That purple jade mask was not an ordinary item. It could block the detection of divine sense, preventing others from prying into his true appearance. There was no doubt that the purple-robed man did not want to expose his identity. Ji Tianxing stared at him with a gloomy gaze. After looking him up and down a few times, he vaguely felt that he was somewhat familiar. However, he could not see any clues and could not guess the other party's identity. Thus, he secretly used the 10,000 divine eyes to see the truth. His eyes immediately turned dark gold, releasing a mysterious power as he looked at the purple-robed man. The disguise effect of the purple jade mask was immediately seen through by the 10,000 divine eyes. Ji Tianxing vaguely saw that under the mask was a pale face with a white beard. Unfortunately, the 10,000 divine eyes could not completely see through the disguise of the mask. The face that Ji Tianxing saw was also somewhat blurry and distorted. He could not recognize who it was at all. The purple-robed man looked at him sharply and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Ji Tianxing, don't waste your energy. This Emperor's void mask is not something you can see through." Ji Tianxing could naturally tell that this person's voice was fake. He frowned and asked in a cold tone, "You know me? And you can find me so accurately in this vast ruins of God. You want to kill me, but you wear a mask to hide your identity. This means that I know you, or at least I've seen you before." The purple-robed man's reaction was still calm, without the slightest ripple. He said in a low voice, "You are from Tianzhu Mountain and you claim to be the successor of Kenshin. It is difficult for the powerhouses of the major forces not to know you. As for this emperor's identity, you don't have to guess anymore. There will never be an answer. Because you don't know this emperor, nor have you seen this emperor. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. Oh? So we have no enmity? The purple-robed man shook his head calmly and said in an indifferent tone, Of course not. Kenshin defeated so many powerhouses and killed so many people in his life. I don't know how many powerhouses' families were destroyed because of him, and how many forces declined and were destroyed because of him. Kenshin has fallen and we have no way to take revenge. We can only blame this on Tianzhu Mountain. You are the successor of Kenshin, the successor of Tianzhu Mountain. If this emperor doesn't kill you, who will I kill? Ji Tianqing knew very well that this person's words were half true and half false and could not be trusted completely. However, he did not probe further and continued to ask, The ruins of God is so big and I moved alone. How did you know my whereabouts? A hint of contempt flashed through the purple-robed man's eyes as he sneered, Of course I have to thank your arrogance and arrogance. After the Yin-Yang secret realm appeared, you fought an intense battle with the Broken Sky Alliance. Many powerhouses saw it with their own eyes and it spread a few months ago. Although you didn't say your name, your characteristics are so obvious that those who know you can naturally guess that it's you. What's even more laughable is that this emperor searched for you in the ruins of God for 3 months and it was originally very difficult to find you. I didn't expect that you would undergo the tribulation here and cause such a huge commotion that could be seen clearly from 1,000 miles away. You're clearly courting death. Ji Tianqing came to a realization and was secretly on guard. Back then, I dominated my generation and offended countless powerhouses and powerhouses. Even now, there are still countless powerhouses eyeing my inheritance and the mystery of ascension. There are also many powerhouses and powerhouses eyeing Tianzhu Mountain covetously. I have to be more careful in the future. Chapter 2005. The purple-robed man placed his hands behind his back and stood proudly in the night sky. He looked down at Ji Tianqing from above and exuded a powerful and domineering aura. A formless aura spread out in all directions and covered a radius of a few hundred miles. Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that the purple-robed man's strength had reached an unfathomable level. Although the purple-robed man was a martial sage like Tian Slayer of the Broken Sky Alliance and Ji Shilua of the North Underworld Mountain. However, there were differences in strength between the martial sages and their cultivation realms. There were 9 levels of the martial sage realm. Tian Slayer's cultivation realm was around the 2nd level of the martial sage realm. Ji Shilua was a 3rd level of the martial sage realm. The purple-robed man was at least a 6th level of the martial sage realm. It was no exaggeration to say that even if Tian Slayer and Ji Shilua worked together, they would not be a match for the purple-robed man. Ji Tianqing understood this point and thought to himself that he could not fight the purple-robed man head-on. He had to outsmart him. At that moment, the purple-robed man spoke again. Ji Tianqing, are you thinking of your last words? There's no need for that. If you have any last words, just keep them to yourself. You can go and die now. With that, the purple-robed man waved his hand and shot out a golden light that covered the heavens and earth. Instantly, an incomparably violent force enveloped the area within a radius of a few hundred miles. The surrounding 10,000 feet tall mountains were uprooted and quickly shrunk in the golden light. In the blink of an eye, the 10 mountains shrunk to 100 feet tall and turned into balls of golden light that shot towards Ji Tianqing. With a wave of his hand, the purple-robed man could command the mountains and turn everything in the universe into his power. Only experts of the 6th level of the martial sage realm and above could use such a technique. Ji Tianqing did not dare to be careless and quickly waved the Burial of Heaven sword to display his sword skills. Big Dipper sword. He stabbed out with his right hand and instantly shot out 49 rays of golden light that hit the 10 balls of golden light. Boom, 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 boom. A series of muffled sounds burst out. The sword light and the golden hill shattered with a bang, turning into an endless amount of fine powder that covered the night sky. Violent shockwaves spread in all directions and Ji Tianqing was sent flying a few miles away. The ground in a radius of 200 miles was also flattened by the shockwaves and turned into ruins. After Ji Tianqing landed on the ground, he flew back into the sky without hesitation and attacked again with his sword. Seeing this scene, the purple-robed man raised his white eyebrows, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Bastard, I haven't seen you in 2 years. This is not possible. The The purple-robed man was filled with shock. This thought flashed through his mind and he found it unbelievable. No, I must get rid of him today. If I let him grow, he will be a big threat in the future. The purple-robed man's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He waved his hand again. Meteor of destruction. He raised his wide sleeves and waved his palms. He formed a profound technique and formed dozens of ancient and mysterious seals. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 99 seals filled the night sky and emitted a bright golden light. Suddenly, 99 silver light spots lit up in the distant sky and rapidly descended. In just 2 breaths, the 99 light spots arrived above the mountain range and turned into giant meteors. Each meteor was as big as a mountain and burned with the fire of the stars. It released a destructive power and blasted toward Zhou. Everything within 1,000 miles was illuminated by the fire of the stars. This area was sealed by the divine power of the stars and was about to be destroyed. Zhou was fearless. He waved his hand and cast a spell. Star Attraction Spell. He formed a spell with his left hand and waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand. It released silver light and formed a giant starlight vortex. Boom, 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 boom. The 99 meteors bombarded the starlight vortex one after another and were all swallowed up by the vortex. Zhou used a secret spell to swallow the meteors and the divine fire of the stars. Of course, his cultivation level was not high enough. He could not swallow 99 meteors in the blink of an eye. He could only borrow the power of the heaven-mending orb to help him swallow the meteors. Even so, his speed was still too slow. He only had time to swallow 92 meteors before he reached his limit. The remaining 7 meteors shattered the starlight vortex on the spot and smashed into him. Boom, boom, boom. An earth-shattering sound exploded and spread over 1,000 miles. 3 craters with a radius of dozens of miles were blasted out of the ground that looked like ruins. The ground within 1,000 miles shook crazily as if there was a huge earthquake. Mountains collapsed and the ground cracked. Spiderweb-like cracks appeared. What an apocalyptic scene. When a martial sage was angry, 1,000 miles would be overturned. Zhou was blasted deep into the ground. His hair was disheveled and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He used his power to shake off the soil around him. With a low roar, he flew out of the crater. In the sky, the purple-robed man witnessed the entire process. He was so shocked that his body trembled and his eyes were filled with horror. How is this possible? He is only in the crossing calamity realm. How can he control the power of the stars and swallow more than 90 meteors? The purple-robed man's strength had reached the peak of the martial sage realm. Among the many martial sages in the world, he was ranked in the top few. He was one of the top powers who was closest to the martial god realm. Due to a special opportunity, he had cultivated a secret spell to trigger the meteors. However, he had not truly mastered the power of the stars. He had only learned a little. However, Zhou performance was like a martial god realm top power. He could swallow and dissolve the power of the stars. This was an unprecedented demon. If the purple-robed man had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that it was true. D***M little b** starred. How did he do it? In the entire Shenwu continent, there are no more than 10 people who can use the power of the stars. They are either peerless martial gods or top martial sages. He is only in the crossing calamity realm, but he can control the stars. He must have inherited the power of Kenshin and cultivated the secret spell to control the stars. Thinking of this, the purple-robed man became excited. His eyes were filled with greed. If that's the case, then the secret spell to control the stars belongs to me. Ever since he understood the mystery of the power of the stars and knew that it was the source of power to reach the martial god realm, he was determined to control the power of the stars. Unfortunately, the secret spell to cultivate the power of the stars was only in the hands of the 3 martial gods. He was not qualified to obtain it. It was impossible for him to cultivate it. Zhou could control the stars. To him, this was a great surprise. I want Kenshin's secret spell. The purple-robed man shouted. In a flash, he rushed toward Zhou and raised his hands to grab him. Chapter 2006. The purple-robed man shouted angrily. Dozens of cracks appeared in the dark night sky and a black void windstorm surged out. Swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, the powerful void windstorm condensed into 2 huge palms and grabbed at Zhou from both sides. Ji Tianxing knew the power of this skill and did not dare to face it head-on. He could only try his best to avoid it. However, the space within a 100-mile radius was sealed by an invisible force. He felt as though he was in a quagmire and could not move. Before he could fly far, he was caught by the huge black palms. The incomparably fierce void storm ruthlessly twisted his body, cutting his body until it was covered in cuts and bruises, and blood flowed out of his body. Fortunately, his physical body was strong enough and he used a protective secret skill in time to block the power of the void windstorm. If it was anyone else, they would have been torn to pieces by the void windstorm. However, Ji Tianxing's crisis was not over. Seeing that the void windstorm did not tear him apart, the purple-robed man shook his hands and released an invisible force. The two void palms were instantly detonated, causing black clouds to explode in the night sky, creating a deafening explosion. Bang! 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 The deafening sound reverberated for 1,000 miles. The violent shockwaves caused the sky and earth to shake violently. Dense cracks appeared on the ground, extending for 200 to 300 miles in all directions. Ji Tianxing was severely injured and his body twisted and folded strangely. Numerous wounds appeared on his body and blood gushed out. He looked like a ball of paper that had been crumpled into a ball and thrown 100 miles away in the night sky. Finally, he smashed into the ruins. Plop! After he landed on the ground, a deep pit was formed in the ruins and dust filled the sky. Ji Tianxing was covered in blood and curled up in a ball at the bottom of the deep pit. Half of his body was buried in the mud. The terrifying power of the void explosion had not only injured his body but also his spiritual soul. At this moment, he was sure that the purple-robed man's strength was not as simple as a rank 6 martial sage. He was at least a rank 8 martial sage. Ji Tianxing was only at the 8th level of the Tribulation Passing realm while his opponent was at the 8th level of the Martial Sage realm. There was a difference of a whole realm between the two, so how could they be mentioned in the same breath? No matter how monstrous Ji Tianxing was, there was no way he could withstand it. The only thing he could do now was to think of a way to escape. Fighting to the death despite knowing that you were outmatched wasn't bravery but stupidity. At this moment, the purple-robed man strode across the night sky and rushed over with a murderous aura. Ji Tianxing, it's time for you to die. The purple-robed man let out a deep growl, looking down at Ji Tianxing from a high position. He then waved his hand and sent out a faint blue flame. Soul-breaking water. The earth-shattering blue flames were like a waterfall, pouring down from the sky and about to drown Ji Tianxing. Before the blue flames arrived, Ji Tianxing had already sensed the extreme coldness and tearing in his soul. He didn't doubt that this kind of blue flame was specifically used to deal with the soul. Once he was hit, even if he didn't die, his soul would be severely injured. He might even faint on the spot. At this critical moment, he could only pull himself together and fight back with all his might. Heavenly Dragon Palm. Ji Tianxing let out a low growl, releasing a vast amount of dermic powers and fiercely sent out 2 palms. The star divine fire spurted out from his palms, forming 2,000 feet long silver divine dragons that attacked the blue waterfall. Bang bang! The heavenly dragon formed by the power of the stars collided with the blue flames, creating a deafening sound. The 2 silver heavenly dragons shattered on the spot, exploding into billions of silver light fragments, which were quickly swallowed by the blue flames. However, the waterfall formed by the blue flames was also torn apart and its power was greatly reduced. The waterfall was about to reach Ji Tianxing's head and was about to drown him. Ji Tianxing's body emitted golden flames and immediately merged with the burial of Heaven Sword. Black Tortoise Sacred Sword. Ji Tianxing merged with the Heaven Burier Sword and turned into a giant sword that was thousands of feet tall and shone with golden light. The giant sword was like a divine dragon, coiled up and connected head and tail. Within the golden light, a giant tortoise-shaped beast that was as large as a mountain and had a majestic appearance appeared. It was the black tortoise of the 4 sacred beasts. For many years, Ji Tianxing had used the white tiger sacred sword, the vermilion bird sacred sword, and the azure dragon sacred sword, but he had never used the black tortoise sacred sword. This secret technique was the strongest defensive technique of the 4 sacred beasts. Unless it was absolutely necessary, why would Ji Tianxing use it? Bang bang bang. In the next moment, the blue waterfall that blotted out the sky hit the Heaven Burier Sword and Ji Tianxing with a loud bang. The blue icy brilliance quickly swallowed the golden light and drowned the shadow of the black tortoise. Even the 1,000-foot-long golden sword was swallowed up by the icy blue light and disappeared without a trace. Soon, the golden light and the giant sword were both covered, leaving only the blue brilliance in the night sky. The purple-robed man stood in the night sky and looked at this scene with a ferocious expression. He sneered proudly. It's too easy for you to kill you like this. I will seize your soul and memory and obtain Kenshin's inheritance and secrets. The next martial god realm expert will be me. As he spoke, the purple-robed man clenched his fists proudly, his eyes shining with hope. After a few breaths, the blue brilliance became weaker and weaker and was about to dissipate. The purple-robed man collected his thoughts and looked down. He thought that the Burial of Heaven sword must have been severely damaged. Ji Tianqing's soul had also been destroyed and he died on the spot. However, when he saw the scene in front of him clearly, he was stunned. The giant golden sword was still trying its best to hold on. Even though the shadow of the black tortoise was mostly destroyed and only had 4 legs and a tail left, it was still resisting the corrosion of the blue brilliance. The purple-robed man could clearly sense that Ji Tianqing's aura was still in the giant sword. This little bastard is indeed monstrous. He actually blocked my ultimate skill. The purple-robed man was stunned for a moment. Then he slowly raised his right palm and gathered the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles and slammed it down. Heaven-shaking palm. The endless power of heaven and earth condensed into a giant 5-colored palm and slammed down like a mountain. The purple-robed man believed that Ji Tianqing and the Burial of Heaven sword were at the end of their tether and would definitely not be able to withstand his palm. However, at this moment Ji Tianqing's figure flew out of the Burial of Heaven sword. His face was pale and his body was covered in blood. However, he looked up at the sky unyieldingly and his eyes were filled with a determined cold light. He raised his left palm and released a turbulent golden flame. It condensed into a golden spear shadow that was hundreds of feet long and blasted toward the purple-robed man. God-slaying spear. The power of the golden spear was comparable to an attack from a deity and could pierce through everything. In the next moment, the god-slaying spear shattered the giant 5-colored palm and stabbed toward the purple-robed man with undiminished power. The purple-robed man did not expect Ji Tianqing to have the strength to counterattack and release such a miraculous ultimate skill. Bang! Chapter 2007. The purple-robed man had underestimated his enemy and was hit by the god-slaying spear. But he was an 8th-degree martial saint after all and had reached the peak of martial arts. His power was terrifying. At the critical moment he dodged sideways in time and avoided the god-slaying spear's sharp edge. Therefore his body was never pierced by the god-slaying spear. The god-slaying spear brushed past his left shoulder and severed his left arm on the spot. The severed arm fell to the night sky and spurted out a mouthful of pale golden blood. The heart-wrenching pain caused the purple-robed man to tremble and break out in cold sweat. He gave a painful groan and staggered back 1,000 feet before he dissipated the impact of the god-slaying spear. At the same time, Ji Tianqing controlled the sword of Burial of Heaven and took the opportunity to escape into the distance. Swoosh! He merged with the sword of Burial of Heaven and turned into a ray of golden flowing light. Like lightning he cut across the night sky and flew 100 miles away in the blink of an eye. When the purple-robed man regained his senses, he flew into a rage and started to chase after him. Ji Tianqing, you despicable beast! You still want to escape? Wishful thinking! He shouted angrily and his eyes turned ferocious with murderous intent. Swoosh! White light burst forth from his body, and his feet moved in a mysterious way. With each step he could travel 100 miles. In just 20 breaths, both parties had flown 1,000 miles away. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing was caught up by the purple-robed man. After all, his flying speed could not be compared with the purple-robed man's. Little beast, where are you going? The purple-robed man yelled as he waved his palms and shot out 2 giant golden palms towards Ji Tianqing, who was 10 miles away. Ji Tianqing merged with the sword of Burial of Heaven and exerted force with the Burial of Heaven at the same time. Instantly the power exploded to the maximum. Swoosh! The speed of the sword of Burial of Heaven increased by 3 times and accelerated forward. In the blink of an eye, the sword of Burial of Heaven flew 100 miles away. The 2 giant golden palms missed their target and slammed into a huge mountain below with a loud bang. The mountain peak that was thousands of feet tall was smashed into ruins on the spot, causing smoke and dust to fill the sky. Damn it! The purple-robed man cursed angrily and sped up to catch up. The sword of burial of heaven flew for over 1,000 miles in one breath, then gradually slowed down. Tianxing and burial of heaven unleashed their maximum power at the same time. After all, they couldn't hold on for too long. Not long after, the purple-robed man caught up with Tianxing. This time, the purple-robed man didn't repeat the same mistake. When he was still 10 miles away from the sword of burial of heaven, he waved his palm and shot out a dozen cold beams. Swish, swish. Each ray of cold light was a chopstick-length soul-extinguishing nail. It was a very insidious hidden weapon. Based on the purple-robed man's methods, he shouldn't have ended up like this. He could cast an earth-shattering spell and use its mysterious power to completely crush Tianxing. However, Tianxing's speed was too fast. He couldn't make it in time. As long as he could delay Tianxing and slow him down a little, he had absolute confidence that he could make Tianxing stay. The dozen cold beams formed a formation and surrounded the sword of burial of heaven. They were about to shoot down the sword of burial of heaven. At the critical moment, Tianxing decisively put away the sword of burial of heaven and used the teleportation mystic technique. Swoosh. With a flash of white light, he and the sword of burial of heaven disappeared at the same time. The next moment, the dozen cold beams passed through the white light and stabbed into a huge mountain below. Boom, 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 boom. The huge mountain was blasted with dozens of holes and cracks. It collapsed on the spot. At the same time, Tianxing had already crossed 1,000 miles and appeared in the sky 1,000 miles away. He continued to fly without looking back and fled to the south with all his strength. The purple-robed man was stunned for a moment. Seeing Tianxing escape by teleportation, he immediately grinned coldly. Teleportation? What's the use of that? Since I've already made my move, I definitely won't let you leave the ruins of God alive. As soon as he finished speaking, the purple-robed man sped up and strode across the sky, chasing toward the south. About 2 hours later, the purple-robed man caught up with Tianxing again. He then used his secret technique in an attempt to capture Tianxing. Tianxing had no choice but to use all his strength and all kinds of trump cards to deal with him. In the end, he escaped with minor injuries and escaped the purple-robed man's pursuit. However, the purple-robed man was determined to kill him. How could he let him escape? Both parties started a chase in the ruins of God and rushed to the south at an extremely fast speed. A day later, both parties chased for 200,000 miles. This was already Tianxing's limit. He was already heavily injured, and after a series of battles and fleeing, his magic power had long been depleted. At this time, he was truly an arrow at the end of its flight. However, the purple-robed man's aura was long and drawn out, as if he would never tire. When he caught up with Tianxing again, Tianxing was in complete despair. He had no other choice and there was nowhere to hide. Even the sword of burial of heaven could not help him escape. He could only join forces with him to fight the purple-robed man to the death. Whoosh! The purple-robed man's figure flashed and blocked Tianxing's path. Tianxing could only stop and stand in the sky with a pale face. He held onto the sword of burial of heaven and panted violently. The purple-robed man saw Lu Yin's sorry state and detected that Lu Yin's aura was chaotic and his magic power was extremely weak. A mocking expression appeared on his face. "Kid, you were able to escape from me a few times and survive until now. It's truly a miracle. Even I can't help but admire you. You're indeed a rare genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. In the future, there will definitely be a place for you in Shenwu Continent's war god position. It's a pity that you were born at the wrong time to meet me. Don't make any more pointless struggles. Give up resisting and I'll give you a dignified death." The purple-robed man placed his hands behind his back and stood proudly. His entire body exuded a powerful confidence and domineering aura. Although Tianxing was in a sorry state, his expression remained calm. His eyes were indifferent as he said, "There's an entire realm of difference between our strength, so it's normal that I'm not your opponent. You're a peak martial saint, but you still can't kill me. This is your humiliation. Furthermore, your confidence and arrogance are laughable in my eyes. Even if I'm at the end of my rope, do you really think that you can kill me?" The purple-robed man frowned and sneered mockingly. I really can't think of a way for you to escape. In your current state, you can't even use a complete secret technique, can you? I only need one palm to blast you into smithereens." Ji Tianxing looked at him coldly and sneered. If you can't think of a way, then it only proves that your knowledge is too shallow. Not only can you not do anything to me, but you will also die under my sword soon. When I break through to the martial saint realm, it will be the day of your death. When the purple-robed man heard this, he immediately began to laugh maniacally. Ah, this is the biggest joke in the world. It's too laughable. Ji Tianxing ignored him and secretly activated the small golden pagoda in his mind, releasing a mysterious golden light. Whoosh! A layer of sacred golden light immediately enveloped Ji Tianxing. Chapter 2008. Seeing Ji Tianxing disappear again, the purple-robed man sneered disdainfully. Hee, damned little bastard, are you trying to teleport away again? I've already said that I will never let you leave the ruins of God alive. As soon as he finished speaking, the purple-robed man released an invisible divine sense and extended it in all directions. After 2 breaths, his divine sense had covered a radius of 3,000 miles. Within this range, hundreds of mountains and dozens of rivers, billions of trees and flowers were all covered by his divine sense. From the big demons and giant beasts to the small flowers and birds, nothing could escape his perception. Previously, when Ji Tianxing teleported 1,000 miles away, he could not escape the lock of his divine sense. Because of this, he could follow Ji Tianxing closely and not be shaken off. Now he thought that the result would not change. It was impossible for Ji Tianxing to escape from his grasp. However, after the purple-robed man's divine sense had scanned a radius of 3,000 miles, he could not find any trace of Ji Tianxing. He was stunned and frowned in confusion. He muttered to himself, where did that kid go? Is he invisible? Even if he is invisible, I can still find your aura. Therefore, the purple-robed man used his divine sense again and carefully scanned a radius of 3,000 miles. The result shocked him even more. He could not find Ji Tianxing's aura. Ji Tianxing was not within the radius of 3,000 miles at all. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air and evaporated into thin air. How can this be? How is this possible? The purple-robed man was a little dumbfounded and muttered in disbelief. He teleported a few times before, and each time he could only teleport 1,000 miles away. That was his limit. He can't be more than 3,000 miles away from my divine sense. What the hell, where did he escape to? The purple-robed man was unwilling to accept the fact that the cooked duck had flown away. He was so angry that his killing intent surged. He did not believe it and personally searched a radius of 3,000 miles, even using all kinds of secret techniques. After tossing and turning for 2 hours, he still came up empty-handed. He had completely lost track of Ji Tianxing. He had no choice but to suppress his anger and continue flying south. That little bastard indeed has some tricks up his sleeve. He actually managed to escape right under the nose of this emperor. However, no matter how many tricks you have up your sleeve, I will never let you off. No matter what, he had to leave the ruins of God and escape back to the Pillar of Heaven mountain. He had to go from north to south, through the entire ruins of God, and leave from the vicinity of Blackwind Cliff. I will be waiting for him near Blackwind Cliff. I don't believe that he won't come. The purple-robed man sneered after he made up his mind. Then he flew towards the south at lightning speed and soon disappeared into the horizon. Meanwhile, in the 5th level of the 9 Heavens 10 Extremities, Ji Tianxing was sitting cross-legged on the altar, quietly circulating his energy to heal his injuries. Beneath him was the Origin Divine Formation, and around him were 18 Yao God statues. There were thousands of shining stars above his head, sprinkling down bright starlight that enveloped his body. He took a healing elixir, and with the help of the immense power of the stars, he quickly healed the wounds on his body. As for the injuries to his divine soul, he could only slowly recuperate. There was no way he could recover quickly. Earlier, when the purple-robed man was pursuing him, he was already in a hopeless situation and would die for sure. At the critical moment, he took out the small golden pagoda. That exquisite small pagoda was the incarnation of the 9 Heavens 10 Extremities pagoda, and also the secret key to enter and exit the pagoda. It was this small pagoda that saved Ji Tianxing, allowing him to disappear into thin air and enter the 9 Heavens 10 Extremities pagoda hundreds of thousands of miles away. This was equivalent to teleporting hundreds of thousands of miles. Even a martial god expert could not do it. The purple-robed man would never have thought that Ji Tianxing actually had such a trump card. The entrance to the Yin-Yang mystic realm had already disappeared. Other than Ji Tianxing, No one could enter the mystic realm and no one could find the Nine Heavens Ten Extremities Pagoda. Ji Tianqing was absolutely safe hiding in the Nine Heavens Ten Extremities Pagoda. Not to mention the purple-robed man, even a martial god could not do anything to him. After all, the Nine Heavens Ten Extremities Pagoda could even block the will of heaven, so what was a mere martial god? The only thing that made Ji Tianqing feel a little regretful was that he had finally left the pagoda and traveled hundreds of thousands of miles. In order to escape, he instantly returned to the Nine Heavens Ten Extremities Pagoda. His previous journey had been in vain. Of course, compared to the danger to his life, this was nothing at all. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. Ji Tianqing quietly recuperated for 15 days before his injuries were healed. Previously, his body was twisted like a ball of crumpled paper, and his internal organs and bones were all deformed. After half a month of treatment, coupled with his strong recovery ability, his physical injuries were finally healed. The injuries to his divine soul had also recovered by 70%, and it was no longer a problem. His strength had also returned to normal, and his essence, qi, and spirit were more vigorous. As long as he did not encounter a peak martial sage like the purple-robed man, there was basically not much danger. Half a month has passed. That purple-robed man must have left the ruins of God. If I come out now, he will definitely not be able to find me. Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and muttered in an indifferent tone. The voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind and said in a complicated tone, "He has already lost track of you. The ruins of God is so big, if he can still meet you, how unlucky will you be? According to my estimation, that is a 1 in 10,000 chance, right?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said coldly, "There are many martial sages in the divine martial continent, at least 1 to 200 people. However, there are only 3 to 5 peak martial sages who can reach the 8th stage realm. That purple-robed man's aura somehow feels familiar. I will be able to find out his identity very soon." The burial of heaven was silent for a moment before he consoled him. "Compared to the storms and dangers we experienced back then, this matter is nothing. Actually, you already have the answer in your heart, but you are not sure. So what if you know that person's identity now? You still can't fight him head-on and take your revenge. The most important thing now is for you to break through to the martial sage realm as soon as possible, then you will be qualified to fight him." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "There are many things that I cannot do before I reach the martial sage realm. I can't refine that star core, can't restore the prestige of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, can't kill the purple-robed man for revenge, and can't enter the North Underworld mountain. Let's go back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and cultivate in seclusion for a period of time, and strive to break through to the martial sage realm within half a year." After saying that, Ji Tianqing took out the golden pagoda and communicated with it with his divine sense. The golden pagoda released a sacred golden light and condensed into a light door in front of him. He stepped into the light door and his figure immediately disappeared. Swoosh! In the next moment he appeared outside the yin-yang mystic realm on the peak of a mountain. It was dusk now and the orange sunset was about to fall into the sky. The peak of the mountain was bleak. Ji Tianqing looked around and saw that the surroundings were peaceful and there was nothing unusual. Therefore he stepped into the sky and flew towards the south as fast as a ray of light. Chapter 2009. Although things were as Ji Tianqing had expected, everything was fine. The purple-robed man did not appear again, as if he had given up on the pursuit. However, he was cautious and would not be careless. When he was about to leave the ruins of God, he chose to take a detour and avoid the Black-Wind Cliff. The reason was self-evident. Everyone knew that when he left the ruins of God and returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, he would definitely pass by the Black-Wind Cliff. The purple-robed man most likely also knew that there was a possibility that he would fall into the trap at the Black-Wind Cliff. Since that was the case, Ji Tianqing naturally had to take precautions early. He would rather spend a few more hours and take a detour of tens of thousands of miles. After successfully leaving the ruins of God, he was like a bird flying in the sky and a fish leaping in the sea, soaring freely. 20 days later, Ji Tianqing crossed thousands of mountains and rivers and returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. When he arrived at the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, it was early in the morning and the sun was rising. Looking from afar, the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was bathed in the morning light and surrounded by colorful spirit energy. There were flocks of birds and spirit cranes flying in the sky. At the foot of the mountain there was a large river that flowed like a jade belt. Halfway up the mountain, it was shrouded in colorful auspicious clouds. There were also a few young martial artists who had traveled far and wide to climb the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. They carried dreams and expectations, wanting to climb the Pillar of Heaven's mountain to become a disciple of a master. After not returning for more than half a year, the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was clearly more prosperous. Tianxing was gratified as he passed through the colorful auspicious clouds and landed on the training ground at the peak of the mountain. On the vast training ground, there were many disciples practicing swordsmanship. Tianxing glanced at them and saw that they were all new disciples. There were more than 300 of them. He quietly crossed the training ground and returned to his residence in the Pillar of Heaven's palace. After entering the secret room, he ordered Zhi Bai to send a message and summon the Huanglong Daoist for an audience. Zhi Bai hurriedly turned around and left to carry out his mission. Tianxing sat in the secret room and closed his eyes to rest for a moment. The Huanglong Daoist quickly arrived. Disciple greets Master. Welcome back to the palace, Master. Huanglong Daoist quickly walked into the secret chamber with a joyful expression and bowed respectfully. Tianxing nodded slightly and said calmly, "Get up." Huanglong Daoist straightened his body and said, "Master, you went to the ruins of God for more than half a year." This disciple was very worried. "Fortunately, you finally returned safely." Tianxing waved his hand and said with an indifferent expression, "Master did indeed encounter some trouble in the ruins of God. There were many episodes. However, I've already resolved it. There's nothing to worry about. However, I have been worried about the situation at Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Huanglong Daoist cupped his hands in greeting and hurriedly reported, "Master, please be at ease. With this disciple guarding Tianzhu Mountain, there is nothing to worry about. For the past half a year, the Pillar of Heaven's mountain situation had been very good, and it was rapidly recovering. The disciples' cultivation resources were doubled, and they were able to receive guidance from the elders and deacons. Their enthusiasm for cultivation was high, and their strength had increased exponentially. The Pillar of Heaven's mountain's reputation had spread, intimidating the 9 sects, 18 factions and hundreds of cities. Hundreds of millions of people gradually became loyal. Almost every day, there were young martial artists from all over the world rushing to Pillar of Heaven's mountains to participate in the assessment and enter the sect. This disciple followed your instructions and relaxed the requirements to accept disciples. We have also recruited more than 500 outer disciples and more than 1,000 odd-job disciples. Speaking of the changes in the situation at Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Huanglong Daoist was filled with gratification, and his eyes were filled with hope and expectation. Tianxing was very satisfied with this and nodded, "That's good. With you in charge of the sect's affairs, Master can be at ease." "Oh right, the disciples' cultivation resources have been doubled, and the sect has recruited so many new disciples. Is the cultivation resources in the treasury enough?" When this question was raised, Huanglong Daoist was startled for a moment. He looked hesitant and his eyes dimmed. "To be honest, Master, the sect is now unable to make ends meet. The cultivation resources in the treasury are decreasing rapidly, and we are already struggling to make ends meet. Fortunately, the sect has the support of the divine array, which gathers the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 1,000,000 miles. Currently, it is still able to satisfy the disciples' cultivation needs. Moreover, I have also sent out a few elders and deacons to try their best to open up a place with precious resources." Tianxing nodded slightly and said solemnly, "I will solve this problem as soon as possible. You can continue with the previous plan." After that, he took out a large amount of cultivation resources from the spatial ring and handed them to Huanglong Daoist for safekeeping to support the sect's operations. This batch of cultivation resources was worth a few 100 million spiritual stones. It was enough to support Pillar of Heaven's mountains for another 2 years. Tianxing secretly made up his mind to think of a way to get more cultivation resources as soon as possible. Pillar of Heaven's mountains had finally recovered its vitality and was improving. If the lack of resources led to the stagnation of development, it would be a pity. Tianxing asked again, "Huanglong, how is the reward mission that I issued going?" Huanglong Daoist respectfully reported, "Master, in the past half a year there have been very few demons that have invaded the sect's territory, and they have not caused any disasters. In the past half a year, the martial artists from various sects and cities have only captured 12 demons and killed more than 20. But those demons were just insignificant characters not worth mentioning. I have already followed the rules and given out rewards to those martial artists who have contributed. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, the war between North Underworld Mountain and Luoshui Divine Kingdom has reached its most intense moment. Of course, they will not have the time to invade Pillar of Heaven's mountains. If they continue to be in a stalemate, it will give the sect a chance to breathe and recover as soon as possible. After that, Ji Tianqing asked Huang Long a few more things. Huang Long answered one by one and reported the situation in detail. After an hour, the master and disciple finished their discussion. Huang Long bowed and left the secret chamber. After Huang Long left, Ji Tianqing sat alone in the secret chamber and pondered for a while. He suddenly thought of something and hurriedly took out the sword of burial of heaven and entered the sword's world. Whoosh! In a flash of light he appeared in the sky above peaceful Earth City. The flourishing peaceful Soil City was now more than twice as large as it had been before. The number of Earth's spirit commoners had also doubled, reaching around 10,000 people. However, when Ji Tianqing looked down at peaceful Earth City, he found that the city was a little messy. Many Earth spirit citizens were repairing the damaged buildings and streets. The ground outside peaceful Earth City was covered in traces of battle, and there were still cracks in the ground. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and summoned the Golden Mountain King with his divine sense. The Golden Mountain King carried his dark golden warhammer and rushed over like a streak of light. This king greets the young master. What orders do you have for me today? Ji Tianqing pointed at peaceful Earth City and asked, Golden Mountain King, what happened in the city? Why is it like this? The Golden Mountain King showed a bitter smile. After a moment of hesitation he explained, Young master, didn't you get a blue Kuan and throw it here? That blue Kuan was very angry and caused a ruckus in the city for a long time. It even fought with the Xitigarbha divine armor many times. Chapter 2010. When Ji Tianqing left the divine pagoda, he took Lan Kuan with him. He had nowhere to put Lan Kuan, so he threw it into the sword world. After that, he was intercepted by the purple-robed man and had no time to care about this matter. Now he finally remembered Lan Kuan. He didn't expect that Lan Kuan had already caused trouble and harmed peaceful Earth City. Lan Kuan's strength was extraordinary. It had already reached the 7th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Fortunately, the Xitigarbha divine armor protected peaceful Earth City and could resist Lan Kuan's attacks and destruction. However, the Xitigarbha divine armor's strength was only at the 6th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. It could only resist Lan Kuan's attacks and destruction, but it couldn't defeat Lan Kuan. After the Jinshan king reported the matter to Ji Tianqing, he said with a bitter face, Young master, that Lan Kuan doesn't have the intention to kill. It's just complaining and throwing a tantrum. However, our peaceful Earth City can't withstand its continuous torment. That fellow hides in the lake and comes to cause trouble every few days. This king and the Xitigarbha divine armor can't do anything to it. Our people have been on tenterhooks all this time. Young master, you should go take a look. It's best if you can make that Lan Kuan behave. Ji Tianqing nodded and comforted, Jinshan king, don't worry. I'll go find it now. With that, he turned and left peaceful Earth City, flying toward the east. The current sword world was several times larger than before. It had already reached a radius of 500,000 kilometers. To the east of peaceful Earth City was a continuous mountain range and forest. After flying for hundreds of thousands of kilometers, Ji Tianqing discovered a huge lake among the mountains. It was a huge lake with a radius of 500 kilometers. The surface of the lake was sparkling and filled with spiritual energy. Billions of fish, prawns and many water-type demon beasts lived in the lake. The Lan Kuan, which was thousands of feet long, lay quietly at the bottom of the lake. Half of its body was buried by pebbles and sand. It seemed to be tired and was lying at the bottom of the lake, taking a nap. Its huge mouth was slightly open as it breathed lightly. The fish and prawns that swam past it would be sucked into its bloody mouth and become its food. Ji Tianqing was infuriated when he saw how leisurely and contented it was. Shua. Ji Tianqing stood on the surface of the lake and looked down at Lan Kuan at the bottom of the lake. He sneered and said in a playful tone, I thought you wanted to leave this place. Now it seems that you are quite comfortable. Lan Kuan, who was currently dozing off, was immediately startled awake and hurriedly opened his big eyes. It suddenly floated out of the water, creating a huge wave that was 10 feet high. It stared at Ji Tianqing with its eyes wide open and said angrily, You bastard! Liar! You despicable bastard, how dare you come and see me? Probably because it was too angry, its big nostrils kept spraying out water like a fountain. Ji Tianxing was so angry that he laughed and asked in a playful tone, "Why wouldn't I dare to see you? I brought you away from the deity sea and settled you in this paradise to help you. Not only are you not grateful to me, but you also hate me so much that you even attacked my people. You are ungrateful, biting the hand that feeds you." Lan Kuan was stunned for a moment. It wanted to refute, but it opened its mouth and could not say a word. It could only change the topic and said angrily, "Anyway, I don't care. I don't want to stay here. I want to go back to the deity sea." Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "The mystic realm has disappeared and the celestial pagoda is closed. No one can enter the celestial pagoda anymore." What? Lan Kuan was stunned. Its big eyes were covered with a layer of mist. It said with tears in its eyes, "Then I will never be able to return to the deity sea? Ooh, you bastard, you big liar." Ji Tianxing said indifferently, "What's so good about staying in the deity sea? It's boring and you can't break through the saint realm, let alone reach the immortal realm. You will be safe in this paradise and there will be others to relieve your boredom. I can also guide you in your cultivation and help you break through the saint realm as soon as possible, or even reach the immortal realm." Lan Kuan said gloomily, "Even if I was the only one in the deity sea, it would still be better than here. They all bullied me. Especially that black monster." The black monster it was referring to was the guardian deity of the earth spirit race, the divine armor of Xidagarba. Ji Tianxing was so angry that he laughed. He scolded, "You have the nerve to say that they bullied you? Weren't you the one who went to the peaceful earth city to cause trouble first? If you didn't go to the peaceful earth city to cause trouble, would they have attacked you?" Lan Kuan was speechless. It couldn't refute him. It muttered weakly, "Then you threw me here in a completely unfamiliar environment. Of course I had to protect myself. Also, I was very angry at the time and needed to vent my anger. Who knew that they would be so petty? I only flopped around a few times and spilled some water." It didn't even have the courage to speak anymore, and its voice became softer and softer. Ji Tianxing sneered again. "You fat fish, don't you know what kind of body you are? You flopped around a few times and the earth cracked for them. You spilled some water and the result was a flood. As one of the 7 ancestors of the monster race, can't you be more careful? Can't you be more reserved?" Lan Kuan stared blankly at him. After a long silence, it pursed its lips and said, "But I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't do it on purpose." Ji Tianxing purposely kept a straight face and continued scolding, "It's enough that you went to cause trouble once. Why did you go and cause trouble every few days? Did you think that you were playing with them? With your mountain-sized body, who would dare to play with you like that? Tell me honestly, did you get addicted to playing with them? Did you think it was fun?" Lan Kuan opened its eyes wide, revealing a clear and innocent expression. It looked like it wanted to retort but didn't dare to open its mouth. Ji Tianxing pretended to be angry and asked, "Do you know your mistake now?" Lan Kuan hesitated for a moment before nodding. Ji Tianxing asked again, "Then will you go and cause trouble again next time?" Lan Kuan nodded again without hesitation. It looked like it was accepting criticism humbly. Ji Tianxing immediately rolled his eyes and said angrily, "I seriously suspect that you're a stupid fat fish." Lan Kuan didn't understand what he meant and looked at him in confusion. Ji Tianxing was too lazy to say more and said with a straight face, "In view of your low IQ, I order you to stay here and cultivate well. Strive to break through to the saint realm as soon as possible. When you break through to the martial sage realm, I will find you an excellent partner and let him teach you." Lan Kuan's eyes suddenly brightened and asked subconsciously, "What partner? It's definitely not that ugly black monster, right?" Ji Tianxing revealed a meaningful smile and shook his head, "Of course not. Your future partner is a wise and carefree white dragon." "Dragon?" Lan Kuan's eyes brightened and asked eagerly, "Where is it? Can I take a look at it first? What does it look like? If it is ugly, then I won't play with it." Chapter 2011. Lan Kuan's temperament and intelligence were similar to that of a child. It was pure and kind. Originally, it was filled with resentment and wanted to leave the sword world as soon as possible. After being lectured by Ji Tianxing, it had forgotten its original intention. Especially when it knew that it would have a white dragon as its companion in the future, all its attention was attracted to it. It did not want to leave the sword world and its mind was filled with fantasies. What did the legendary dragon look like? Seeing its reaction, Ji Tianxing laughed in his heart. His plan of raising a Kun had finally taken a big step. Hence he pretended to be serious and said to Lan Kun, I forgot to tell you that no one in this world can enter the secret realm and return to the holy pagoda except for me. Only I have the secret key to the holy pagoda and can enter and leave at will. So, as long as you stay here and cultivate, you will be able to break through to the holy pagoda. After you break through to the martial sage realm, I will bring you back to the deity sea. Lan Kun was surprised when it heard that. Really? That's great. I still have a chance to return to the deity sea. Big liar, you must keep your word and not lie to me again. Ji Tianxing frowned and muttered in his heart, why does it sound so awkward? However, he knew that Lan Kun's intelligence was not high and he did not argue with it. Fathead fish, you are cultivating based on your talent now and there is no pattern. This progress is too slow. I will teach you a holy skill that will allow your strength to soar and improve rapidly. Great. Lan Kun nodded and asked expectantly, what is the holy skill? Can I reach the god state if I master it? Ji Tianxing smiled and said, reaching the god state is not a problem but it will take some time. This holy skill is called the sky-devouring skill and it is one of the ancient demonic skills. It is a king-grade divine skill created by the Kun tribe. In fact, he had obtained half of the sun-devouring divine skill from Yang Tian's relics and it was similar to the sky-devouring skill. However, the sun-devouring divine skill was a demonic skill created by the Golden Crow. The sky-devouring skill was created by the Kun tribe and it was most compatible with Lan Kun's talent. Lan Kun was stunned and he asked curiously, Big liar, where did you come from? How do you know our secret technique? Ji Tianxing frowned and said in a serious tone, change the way you address me and I'll tell you. But if I don't call you a big liar, what should I call you? Lan Kun looked at him with bright eyes. Seeing how cute it was, Ji Tianxing tolerated it and didn't care about its rude words. You can call me Young Master Ji, Young Master or Master. Lan Kun blinked his big eyes and asked, Master? What you mean is that you want me to acknowledge you as my master. Ji Tianxing explained patiently, the one who imparts the Tao is the teacher. Since I taught you the heaven-devouring art, I am your teacher. Moreover, there are countless people in the world who want to take me as their master. It's your honor to be my disciple. Lan Kun instinctively shook his head and said with a pout, although I really want to believe you, I keep feeling that you seem to be bragging. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and snapped, are you going to be my disciple or not? If you don't, you won't be able to learn the heaven-devouring art. If you don't learn the heaven-devouring art, you won't be able to break through to the martial sage realm. If you don't break through to the martial sage realm, you won't be able to return to the deity sea. Lan Kun panicked and hurriedly nodded, I'll acknowledge you. I'll acknowledge you. Great. Master. What the hell is master? Ji Tianxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then he activated his qi and slowly stretched out his right palm. A ball of white light shot out. The white light contained a vast amount of information and recorded the first part of the heaven-devouring art. The ancient demonic heaven-devouring art was divided into 3 parts: upper, middle and lower. When the upper part was cultivated to its peak, one could reach the martial god realm. When the middle part was cultivated to its peak, one could reach the peak of the god realm. As for the lower part, when cultivated to its peak, one could reach the peak of the god realm. Ji Tianxing slowly sent the ball of white light, which contained a supreme divine art, into Lan Kun's mind. The sacred and vast white light turned into a surging flood and immediately poured into Lan Kun's mind. Lan Kun was caught off guard and was hit by the vast amount of information. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. Seeing Lan Kun slowly sink to the bottom of the lake, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but smile. He muttered to himself, meeting me is your fortune from 3 lifetimes. The heaven-devouring art has been lost for many years. Apart from me, there is probably no one else who can master the complete art. With that, he turned and left the lake, flying north. Soon he arrived at the depths of the boundless mountain range and stopped above a valley. This valley had expanded to a radius of 300 miles and the surrounding mountains had also risen by 10,000 feet. Inside the valley, there was a 5-colored light barrier covering a radius of 300 miles that enveloped the entire valley. The five-colored light barrier emitted a mysterious and powerful energy fluctuation that made people not dare to approach it. The valley had become a forbidden area. This was where the Yang tomb was located. The god-level formation protecting the Yang tomb had already recovered 50% of its power. Ordinary martial saints couldn't break it. Back then, Ji Tianxing hadn't reached the tribulation-passing realm and hadn't recovered Kenshin's memories. When he discovered the Yang tomb, he was still looking forward to having the Burial of Heaven help him open the Yang tomb when he was stronger. Now there was no need for that at all. This was a backup plan he had left behind back then, hiding a shocking mystery. He was well aware of the truth of this shocking mystery, so why would he need to open it and investigate it? Ji Tianxing stood above the Yang tomb and quietly pondered for a moment before muttering, "When I return to the spirit realm, I'll open the Yang tomb. When that time comes, I'll definitely shock the world." With that, he collected his thoughts and turned to leave. But as soon as he turned around, he saw a towering ancient tree on the mountain to the west of the valley. That towering ancient tree was incomparably majestic. It was actually more than 2,000 feet tall, like a majestic dark green mountain peak. Millions of branches and leaves spread out, covering a radius of several hundred miles. The towering ancient tree absorbed the five-colored spirit qi emitted by the Yang tomb to its heart's content. The branches and leaves all over its body were sparkling green, releasing a dense green with vitality. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing showed a gratified smile and walked in front of the ancient tree. Green light flashed from the ancient tree, and a white-haired old man in black robes immediately appeared, bowing respectfully. "Sanju greets Master." Without a doubt, this towering ancient tree was forefather Sanju. Ever since he fused with the green light treasure tree, he had been cultivating in the sword world. Without the corruption of the mortal world, his heart was no longer bewitched by profit and slaughter. His temperament had also returned to nature, becoming kind and gentle. The current him truly had the demeanor of a transcendent being. Ji Tianxing sized him up and nodded slightly. "Sanju, you're about to undergo your tribulation, right?" Forefather Sanju bowed and answered, "Master is wise." Sanju is currently preparing to welcome the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. Ji Tianxing nodded and said meaningfully, "Everything in the world has a chance to become a god, even plants and trees are the same. As long as you successfully pass the heavenly tribulation and cultivate here in peace, you will also be able to ascend to godhood in the future."